I haven't got the public forum on Robertson yet. Coming about 1:30, just before.
So we're just waiting for Don to join us for public forum. Don Robertson.
You want to do the minutes? No.
He's due at 1:30, so I imagine he's 30 seconds away. Oh, okay. Okay, all right. We'll move on and just deal with petitions. So, Council received by the Chief Executive and the Transport Manager a petition submitted by Alistair Campbell. Oh, sorry, Chapman.
Oh, he's just here now.
He's here now. Hold that thought. We'll go back to item 2.
Okay, I'll leave him in.
Okay. Tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome to this public council meeting, 25th of May 2022. With public forum, we've got Don Robertson, who will speak to us today about concerns for Otago's deepwater alpine lakes. Just reminding everyone, Don is chair of the Guardians of Lake Wanaka and also a member of the Guardians of Lake Hawea and also a trustee of Wanaka. Welcome, Don. We had a 2 or 3 page letter from you with concerns that you submitted, I think, on the 22nd or 3rd of March. And so we have that as access to that. So essentially we're in your hands and you've got 10 minutes to share your concerns with us. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Andrew. I appreciate the opportunity to say a few words and nice to be exactly on time. Well done. As Andrew mentioned, I'm a member of Wanaka, a founding trustee on that group. In my notes, you'll see there I'm talking about what I see as a problem, and that is that for around 150 years, the Otago deepwater alpine lakes have been taken for granted in terms of their ecosystem health. And in the meantime, we've had over that period hugely increased human activities, changes in land use, and the lake water quality is now apparently declining in the absence of any evidence-based management. One of the things that seems to me to be missing is a formal process that involves stakeholders to actually assess the state of the lakes each year or 2 years or some regular interval, and to agree on what research questions need to be addressed in order to have evidence-based management of the lakes. Almost everything that's happened and continues to happen, almost, is in the catchments themselves. There's not a lot of observation going on in the lakes, and that leaves us unable to have what I would regard as good evidence-based management. We should remember that the social, cultural, economic and environmental well-being of the lakes communities depends on evidence-based management to ensure that we don't have too many nutrients, pathogens, toxins, sediment and invasive species getting into the lake systems. All of those things are happening and we need to do more about it than we have been, I believe. Now, for the last 5 years, Wanaka has been working quite well within the community and particularly within the catchments of lakes Wanaka and Hawea. But everything that we talk about relates to all 3 deepwater lakes, not just those 2 in the Upper Clutha. But what we've been doing within Wanaka is in the catchment, doing as much as we possibly can with landowners and community groups to minimise bad stuff running into the lakes. That can really only go so far in the absence of measurement to see what's actually happening in the lakes. There's been one important piece of evidence emerging just recently, and that is that the ecosystem health of all three lakes could be seen to be declining. Mark Schellenberg has analysed the Otago Regional Council chlorophyll A data for lakes Wanaka, Wakatipu and Hawea, and reports that in the last 5 years, chlorophyll A, which is a proxy for planktonic algal abundance, chlorophyll A has doubled in the last 5 years, looking at the data collected by ORC when the state of the environment reporting was expanded, I think after Dean Olsen and Adam Oitendale had been working in the area. Back at that time, state of the environment measurement was only 3 years out of every 10, but I think the decision was made, and a good decision, to take more measurements every year rather than just 3 out of 10. And it's those data that Mark Schellenberg has used to show that the chlorophyll A appears to have at least doubled for all three lakes over the last 5 years. Now, the good news is that the chlorophyll A increase is happening off a very low base. And that is that the existing trophic status of the lakes, a measure of their health, is all microtrophic. In other words, they're at the pristine end of the scale of the lake. And this gives the community and statutory bodies a bit more time to act to protect the lakes and their desirable qualities. But we can't take the current microtrophic status of the lakes for granted, and it probably won't last very long if we continue to have increasing chlorophyll A at the rate of doubling every 5 years. Now, there were similar concerns raised with respect to Taupo and Rotorua lakes over the last 20 years. And $225 million has been found to try and, in the case of Taupo, prevent it getting worse, and in the case of Lake Rotorua, to try and fix it. And that just gives an indication of the scale and the importance, and I guess to some degree, the urgency of treating this particular thing seriously. In other words, do we really want our lakes to decline? If not, where do we find the kind of support, financial support, for that to happen? In other words, if we're serious about the future of these lakes, we'll need to probably look at big dollars. Now, with respect to Wanaka, we did the community catchment plan, and that was done in partnership with the ORC and our Freshwater Improvement Fund program. And the Upper Kluta Catchment Plan covers a lot of good information and advice, which I'm sure many of your members will be aware of. In addition to that, there was the Upper Kluta Shaping Our Future Freshwater Task Force group, which also came up with a whole heap of good points. And in both of those documents, there was recommendations that we should look more closely at some kind of formal process whereby all the stakeholders would get together and agree on the status of the lakes regularly, and on the basis of that agreement, determine what kind of research activities were needed to see whether or not the actions that are taking place in the catchments are making any difference. So I guess that's my main outline. I'm happy to take questions. I've got a rough process outlined on the last page there, which was something that came out of a bit of an arm-waving session on a whiteboard in the Guardians of Lake Wanaka about 8 years ago. And I've continued to give it a nudge every so often. It's something that seems to me to be missing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Don. Really appreciate sharing your concerns that you have. I'll just go to see if there's already questions, not opportunity for debate and discussions, but questions around clarification in terms of Don's presentation. Brian.
Yeah, no, thank you, Don. Thank you for your work. Thank you for Waiwanaka's positive work. So I think this council has had on its books, and it was something to be fair to Councillor Laws, that he initiated a strategic plan for memory for the lakes. But with the potential cutting of the rate increase, my understanding that could go or be delayed. But is that the same thing, just to get that clear in my head, having a strategic plan, and if I've got those words right, for the lakes, as opposed to continually just getting out there and assessing the state and coming up with remedial action? Are they the same thing from your
They're a
perspective?
bit different. I think I've seen the tender document that you've got on GETS for that particular project for the next 2 years, and it will certainly be one way of harvesting a lot of good information. But I'm talking here about something that's agreed to as being a formality that is accepted formally by all the stakeholders, and within that process, assessment is made of the status of the lakes regularly, and that's turned into management actions based on the evidence.
So it's more hands
It's
rolled
possible,
up.
sorry, it's possible that 2-year project that you're referring to could make a big difference. And we at Waiwanaka and the Guardians would be quite happy to work with whoever gets that tender to help, at least with respect to the lakes at this end of the catchments in Otago, to try and make sure that they do mesh as closely as possible. I think there's a bit of a gap between the two at the moment, but we would be happy to work to try and sort that out.
Cool, thank you.
Michael Laws.
Don, first of all, you're preaching to the converted, I think, but good on you, because the sermons still require. Thank you so much for drawing this to our attention again. Pretty much everything that you've said would be compiled within or comported within a lakes management strategy. And I guess what you're saying is not that there shouldn't be one, but that we should move a bit quicker, A, and B, that the alpine lakes, Wakatipu, Wanaka Hawea, I guess the jewels and the environmental crown of Central Otago anyhow, should have a priority. Have I got that right?
Yep.
Okay, any other questions? Sorry, Kate.
I'm just wondering, we've had, and I'm just trying to give some consistency right across Otago, we've had in the past suggestions of having liaison groups where people who are rated for their money, for whether it be flood works or drainage works or river management, work with the councils to come up with work plans, which then feed into the long-term plan and annual plans. Could you see a more formalised sort of lakes liaison group, which could then advocate for more money even being rated if that were needed, being a way of formalising that?
Yes, I think that would be certainly one way of looking at it. Yeah, I guess part of what I've seen since I retired 12 years ago and came back home here has been, and I've contributed to many of them, the number of plans and documents for action produced by both QLDC and ORC. And we've got piles and piles of plans, but often there's not a lot of action on the ground at the end. And I just give one example of the Lake Hayes Management Plan 1995.
Yeah, I meant this as a liaison group for the action planning, the actual financial dollars. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess there'd need to be advocacy, fairly strong advocacy, if anything like the funding that went to try and stop the harm of lakes Taupo and Rotorua lakes. But I would say that the lakes down here, the 3 alpine lakes in Otago, are every bit as good, if not better, in terms of their need for careful management as the Rotorua and lakes and Lake Taupo.
They certainly underpin the tourism.
Okay, any other questions? If not, on behalf of council, thank you, Dawn, for being with us today. And as it's normal practice with presentations or submissions via the public forum, is that we will follow up in whatever the appropriate way is and come back to you and let you know what that is. Yeah, so we will be in touch in terms of following up your concerns raised with us today. So thank you very much for being with us.
Okay, and thanks for the opportunity, and I'll be happy to help make it work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 3, which is the petition. This petition submitted by Alistair Catchment relating to the Palmerston bus users. It was sent to the Chief Executive and the Transport Manager. I'll just read out what the petition says. Attached petitions from the Palmerston residents along with other bus users requesting an extension to the existing Palmerston Dunedin route number 1 return bus service to include a pickup drop-off loop around Palmerston, as is already provided in Waikawiri and Karatani. Currently, many patrons have to drive to the Palmerston bus terminus, an unsatisfactory situation when the proposed route extension would result in a short walk to the bus route from their homes. This is particularly important for those folk who are unable to drive, especially the elderly and young students, etc. This change would involve no more than an additional 5 to 7 minutes bus travel and would invariably result in increased patronage. Your early attention to ensure this change is carried out is requested. And it's signed by Alistair Chapman, and it was, the actual petition was signed by 96 people. It was also CC'd to the Wahimo Community Board, the Wahimo Ward Councillor, Waitaki District Council, and the Moeraki Constituency Councillor, Councillor Malcolm. There is a map attached of their suggested 5 to 7 minute route around the township. So I'll just table all that. I understand that it has been passed on to the Transport Manager. That's all I need to do with the petition.
Do we have to move that we accept it or anything?
My understanding, what Liz had said, there was just those 3 to present the petition, read the petition statement, and quote the number of signatures. That's my understanding.
Yeah, I think so.
Yep.
Chair, if I could just add to that, I actually met with this group with the Wahimo Ward Councillor for the Waitaki District plus the Community Board. And as I turned my microphone on and reminded, thank you, I've met with them. They do receive this week, and you may have seen an announcement by our bus team. They've done a very good job, and now they get a weekend service to Palmerston, which is very much appreciated by the whole, by everyone I've talked to in that region. And Dr. Palmer and his team have been working behind the scenes and seeing how they can accommodate that loop. And I'm sure that they're communicating with back to the community board and the like. So there's some very good work happening. This group is really just keen on making sure that Palmerston is connected to Dunedin and to the other districts of Otago. So it's very positive move.
Thanks, Kevin. Moving on to item 5.
Are we allowed to ask any questions?
It's with regards to standing orders, with regards to receiving a petition. Basically, the other 3 steps that I outlined before, and yeah, so we don't have an opportunity to discuss it at this point, but no doubt we will have at a later date. Moving on to item 5, members are reminded of the need to, in terms of conflict of interest, members are reminded of the need to stand aside from decision making when a conflict arises between their roles as an elected representative and any private or other external interests they might have. Anyone want to raise any
Did
point
we,
on that matter at this time?
sorry, did we confirm the agenda?
Probably not.
Happy to confirm.
I
No,
move that we can,
thank you.
Second.
No, we didn't. Thank you. Move
the
to that
variation.
we confirm the agenda. Seconded by Kate,
It's with the variation that we've already done, some and not non-public.
correct.
yeah, but not whether you confirm.
I will put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you for that. So dealt with conflict of interest. No one wants to raise anything at this point. No. Confirmation of the minutes. Council will consider the minutes of previous council meetings as a true and correct record with or without changes. So just deal with these individually. So we start with the, I'll move that the minutes of the 23rd March 2022 council meeting are a true and accurate record.
Happy to second, but there's a slight problem in the apologies that Councillor Robertson was accepted, but she was also on attending electronically. So I'm not quite sure it was lateness. I think it's just on the, under the apologies.
Yeah.
Sorry, very late notice of seeing that, but
Sorry, thanks, Kate. I was there.
you were there. Yeah, so just take out the apology then.
Right.
May have been for lateness, I don't know.
Thank you. You happy to second those minutes?
Yes, otherwise, yep.
Okay. Any further discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Moving on to the minutes of the 30th of March 2022 extraordinary council meeting. I will move from the chair that a true and accurate record, seconded by Gretchen. Any discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Moving on to the 14th of April 2022, another extraordinary council meeting. I'll move from the chair that they're true and accurate record. Am I seconded? By Kate. Any discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Moving on to the minutes of the 10th of May 2022 extraordinary council meeting. I'll move from the chair that the true and accurate record was seconded by Gary. Any discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carry. I'm not hearing a lot of ayes, but I'm not hearing a lot of no's either. There seems to be more ayes than no's, put it that way. Okay, moving on to the open action from resolutions of council. Anything to raise? Most or one item's been completed and most are in, others are in progress. Nothing to raise there. If not, let's move on. All good. Yep. Let's move on to item 8. 8.1, election of a new deputy chairperson for the ORC. The report was provided to advise the council of the procedure to elect a new deputy chairperson following the resignation of Councillor Laws from the role and to nominate and elect a new deputy chairperson. Essentially, the recommendations outlined there are the steps for the voting procedure. And once they are dealt with, as I indicated in the email, I will a nomination of Councillor Malcolm, and I call for nomination. So, someone happy to move which voting system is used if required?
I'm happy to move one. Yeah, the A.
1A.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I'll second that.
Happy to, so moved by Kate, seconded by Hilary, so it's 1A, and you're happy to also include, well, that means
It's 2 and 3.
3 drops out. So 2 and 4.
Yeah, 2, 3. Yeah, sorry, yes.
1A, 2 and 4. Happy I put those all as one?
Yes.
All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, a call for nominations for the deputy chairperson, position of deputy chairperson.
I'm happy to second your motion.
And I nominate Councillor Malcolm, Kevin Malcolm. Seconded by Kate. Are there any further nominations? If not, means we don't need to
You do
worry.
vote because it's a majority.
Big button.
You still need to vote. There has to be a majority. It has to be accepted by a majority vote.
Okay. We've only got one nomination. Well, okay, look, that's fine. I'm just thinking, do we just do, okay, simple
No,
majority.
good
Okay.
advice about us first.
Amanda, what would your advice be on right at this point?
Yeah, I know I said before, if there's one nomination, you probably didn't need to vote, but actually I recognise that if you've nominated someone, you do actually need to vote to confirm that.
Okay.
Yeah, to confirm that.
So there's
Sorry,
no
I gave
majority.
you- I gave you
Okay.
correct advice earlier. I wasn't thinking through it.
Okay. It's probably easier if we just go to a division and then just work through, and then there's it's nice and clear. Is that okay?
Do we get to speak to it at all at any
Oh,
point?
absolutely. Before we go to a vote, we've got one nomination.
You've got one nomination that's
before
moved
we-
and seconded.
Yes, yes. So before we vote, speakers, can I just check it off? Kevin has proved in the last, months we've been going, 2.5 years, something along those lines, as a councillor who's got a good grasp of, and I suppose being chair of finance, that gives him a good grasp across the organisation in terms of the work streams, the pressures, and obviously has a good connection with staff. Not that anyone else hasn't got a good connection with staff, but I think he's got a good broad understanding what's going on with the organisation. He brings to the table obviously experience in terms of local government. He brings to the table experience around and working in the private sector and in the community sector as well. So, Alexa, do you want to speak?
Sure. I've been in two minds about what to do about this. So I actually have good faith in Kevin and his ability to do this job. I have some serious concerns, though, that may well prevent me from voting for it, even though we're pretty much there. And that is, I worry that we are we have a situation of the least possible diversity, it appears to me, around the table. We have two people of rural background, two people of similar opinions and similar places when we could have had more diversity. And in consideration of other things that are happening, for instance, a CE who's about to be an interim or acting interim CE possibly to be appointed, it looks like the diversity is going to be really quite low. So I have concerns about this, and I'd really like you, Kevin, to really think about this and find ways to mitigate the concern of that. I have, in the worst case scenario, I can see 3 humans who are male of a certain age making decisions for the whole region. And I'm a little bit concerned about that. So I want to make sure that we don't, that the 3 of you together, and especially the 2 of you, mitigate that response, mitigate that issue. And you'll do that by making no assumptions about the thinking that happens around the table. And frankly, Kevin, you've been really good at including me so far in your discussions, and I've appreciated that, even if we don't agree. I want you to be really careful of that, and also that agreements that are come to when things are thought about, you have to think that there's other ways of thinking other than your own. I just want to make that statement. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Alexa. Are there any other speakers? Kate, then Brian.
Thank you. Look, I absolutely, I really appreciate where you, the diversity question. I see this as also a relatively short-time job. What I've loved about, what I really like and appreciate about both the chair and the deputy chair is I can ring either of them. I can not always agree with them. You can have a very long conversation. Sometimes it can go off track, but they're up for that conversation. And that's why I've got the confidence that they will listen and have rigorous conversations, but actually they won't make decisions which should be brought to this table. They will bring things to the table that I don't think they've got any delegated powers to make decisions, and so that they both honour that and are pretty good people at communicating. That's what we need at the moment, and they're also very good in the community, which is what I think we desperately need at the moment. So very happy.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, look, I'm in a similar camp to Alexa. Look, Kevin, I've got no doubt that you'll do a sterling job and that you'll have the votes, because that's the way it seems to work around here. I'm of the view, and it's been my experience, that, I look at it as a chair, deputy chair team, ideally, they're complementary, and ideally, you're not the same age, you're not the same sex, you're not the same culture, and ideally you don't have the same views, whereas there's not too many of those boxes I can put a tick in terms of the team approach, and like we've been down this track for quite a period of time with their previous deputy, and I don't think it worked that well. Like for example, the CE chair, deputy chair, it just seemed to be 2 against 1 with similar sort of views. I think, that's my opinion. But I say again, Kevin has the aspiration. You're a hard worker. I'm sure you'll do a sterling job, and I wish you the best luck. I won't be voting for you, but there it is. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Gretchen.
Yeah, I feel as well that we do need to mention the issue around diversity. I've been on this council for a long time, and previously we did have an understanding that we would aim for diversity so that we could unite the table, essentially, and the community, therefore, as well. So urban, rural, male, female, whatever, but definitely striving for diversity. And I think the way the world's gone in boards, that's just really what we're all aiming for. Greater depth and breadth of experience and perspectives, which allows for greater ability to relate to our employees and our community. And that means that we can be more successful because we can facilitate innovation in the way that we're thinking. We don't need to be best friends. We do need to think about our whole community and our whole table. I think, though, at this point, you need some support. It hasn't gone well with our previous deputy chair. Let's acknowledge that in terms of presence, in terms of ability to relate to those we need to, and looking at the job description too. And I think that, Kevin, overall, you do meet a lot of those criteria. One that we really need to work on as well is relationship with iwi. And I have to take my hat off to you, Andrew. You've been doing a good job with that, but it's something we do need to really take seriously as well. Connection with community. Kevin, you do a great job there in your area, you really do, and wider. So, and Andrew, in terms of having the support that you need, you've chosen Kevin, and we have to listen to that. You've put him forward. So that's important, I think. You need someone in the short term that's going to take us through. And I am going to vote for Kevin today. But I do think that we are in a serious situation as a council of needing to unite, and we really do need to think about that. So, yeah, I hear what others are saying about diversity. It's important, and I know you've taken that on board. So thank you.
Thanks, Gretchen. Michael Laws.
I think diversity is one of those shopfront things that really don't mean much. The only issue here is whether or not Kevin enjoys the confidence of his elected colleagues, and he clearly does, overwhelmingly so. I'd like to endorse that, and that he is a very hardworking member who I think will be a really good, robust and supportive deputy to yourself, Andrew. But if we're going to talk at diversity, good God, look at the age of us. Seriously. How representative are we of the community that we serve? I might also have a look at your skin colour and just see how representative you are if you're going to put diversity there either. The truth of the matter is that local government's become a bit of a closed shop for normal people, excludes most wage and salary earners from actually even contemplating serving, and it acts as a positive disincentive probably from anybody under the age of 50. So we really need to look at those issues before we worry about trying to get some sort of diversity around the table. We need to make our council and serving our council much more inclusive than it is at the moment. And the way it's structured, it's basically determining that 90% of Otago could never possibly serve on the council. And I think that's discriminatory and wrong. Best of luck to you, Kevin. You'll do a great job. You're a hard-working member. Look forward to working with you.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? We'll go back to Kevin if you wish to respond. It's entirely up to you. But are there any other speakers? If not, Kevin.
Look, I absolutely take on board your comments for the councillors that have spoken. Call me Mike. Look, I actually represent the area. While I represent the whole of Otago, I've been voted on from an area which probably has one of the greatest diversities of populations of people in the country, with our huge Pacifica community, our iwi, our Chinese population, the diversity of the Filipinos, the huge diversity of ages within our region, within my ward. I have, if you look at the vote that I got, I've got their confidence. I'm dealing regularly with them in other roles that I have. And so part of that, I sat in a board meeting yesterday at the Otago Community Trust and looked around at this very thought of diversity. And one of the clear things that stood out to me there, that we had Pacifica, we had Maori, we had Chinese, we had members of the gay community, we had a complete range of people. Then we had me sitting in the corner who is grey, pale, stale and male. But in reality, while I may look that, my head is not. So my head does consider the diversity of views that are around, and I will do my very best to ensure that those views are represented in our decisions. We are going through a bit of a battle, but we need to, what we need to do is actually concentrate on the big, bold, yellow, gold letters, I'll call them, because Otago is blue and gold, is our ORC's organisational values and behaviours that we have as part of the job description. So that's what I'll be concentrating on and doing my utmost to live to. But parts, and I feel really enthused by the speakers we had this morning from the DCC, QLDC and Federated Farmers, that they are looking from us to be collaborative and to be creative and to make sure, that we're open and honest and accountable. So all those words resonate. That's what the people want from us. And I'm sure I can go a long way to assist the chair and the council in getting that. And part of my role is to support the chair in building relationships with ORC chief executive and staff. And I'm confident that I can bring a diversity of our views to that position and ensure that I'll do my very best. Tutu te whenua, tutu te tangata, tutu te mara. Look after nature, so nature look after us.
Thank you.
That's my goal while I'm here, and we've got those set of values. So let's all work hard together to make sure we can live by those. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'll just switch straight to a division. Di, we're in your hands.
Thank you. Councillor Calvert,
Yes.
Councillor Deaker,
Yes.
Councillor Hawkes,
Yes.
Councillor Laws,
Yes.
Councillor Callagher.
Yep.
Councillor Malcolm.
Yep.
Councillor Noon.
Yes.
Councillor Robertson.
Yes.
Councillor Scott.
No.
And Councillor Wilson.
Yes. I can count.
Thank you, Claire. Declare Councillor Kevin Malcolm, Deputy Chair, by majority. Well done, Kevin. Look forward to your contribution going forward. Moving on to item 8.2. Code of conduct. So you just a reminder, this report was provided to council to consider revisions of the code of conduct for the Otago Regional Council. Member Bruce Robertson, external consultant, who is with us today. Welcome to the table, Bruce.
Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate that.
And we've obviously been involved in a workshop with Bruce. We've also had obviously the feedback originally from Linda Anderson about the inadequacies of our code of conduct. We've got 4 recommendations there in front of us. I'm not going to run through those at the moment because I'm going to hand over to Bruce. I'll just get you to turn your microphone on. It's probably the right button there on the in front of you. Yep.
Here we go.
Welcome, Bruce. You've been through a process with us, and you've gone away and after workshopping, gone away and obviously spoken to Leanne, written a report, given us a draft code of conduct 2022 for potentially for our adoption. So we're in your hands if you wanted to give a bit of an overview and key messages.
Thanks, Andrew. Look, certainly well, and again, thank you for the chance to look at this. It's been very helpful for me too, professionally. Can I say that? Because I came at this from the approach of a practitioner, if I can call myself that, having undertaken and still undertaking a number of code of conduct reviews, as in contrast to Leanne's approach, which clearly was as a lawyer, providing a critique of, and I'll stress this, the complaint process under your existing 2019 code. It was clear from my terms of reference that I was to focus on the complaint process, which is what my report does. The first thing that I just wanted to note was, Andrew, after the workshop, I spoke with Len as I said I would do that, and it was interesting that there was what appeared to be, to me, a relatively high level of congruence between the discussion we had in this room with what Len actually discussed with me and indeed my own views. So what I think I have put in front of you as a result of my work, at least until this day, has a fair chance of meeting the discussion that we expressed in this room. And there were really, in some sense, if I can summarise it, 2 things that you're after. One was depoliticisation of the complaint process. And there was a lot of discussion around about, does the chair, what's the chair's involvement? And a desire for early intervention, least cost approach to getting and dealing with what are serious matters, which is a code complaint. The second thing that I believe came out of the workshop, and certainly is my view, was that we acknowledged the limitation of the current code's complaint process. That's the 2019 code. And particularly as we discussed the ideas of early intervention, generally around mediation, depoliticisation, talking about it with Len, it brought us back into focus, indeed, your previous code of conduct in terms of its complaint process, which was the 2017 code. So 2017, you adopted a complaint process. 2019, you replaced it with the version that Len reviewed. We've all agreed that the 2017 code has a lot of merit, and my recommendations are based around that 2017 code. So what are some of the key parts? Firstly, I've tried to clarify what is section 12 of the code and indeed Appendix C, which was the description of the complaint process. I won't go into why it needed clarity other than it was potentially overlapping. The important part of my recommended code is that it includes the objectives that you folk worked out in your workshop for what you want in terms of guiding any complaint process. And I thought that was important to include because undoubtedly, despite what you write inside a process, it can be that you're faced as a reviewer or an investigator, sorry, with different circumstances. It's always good to have an expression of the objectives of the council. The other big points that I've made is the insertion of this phrase, an independent person. So essentially, a complaint comes in, it is automatically in the hands of an independent person to handle the complaint process. And that means the removal from political review and control, which was a desire or depoliticisation that we sought. The other feature of it is that is the early place for mediation. In other words, the complainant and the respondent are asked to get round a table with an independent mediator to see whether those differences can be sorted out. The idea being that's the quickest way to deal effectively and fairly with an approach. Another feature which I would like to draw your attention to is that you'll recall in the workshop we had quite a substantial discussion around this idea of what's material. You know, you can have a small breach. It could be trivial, it could be frivolous, it could be not, it could be a material, it might not be material, and there's also seriousness. And on top of that, there is also a matter of what was defined in the old code as a preliminary investigation and a full report. This recommended code does away with the concept of material breach. It does away with the concept of a preliminary assessment as unnecessary and clouding the process. And indeed says the independent investigator, who would only be brought in if mediation doesn't work, so let's remember that, their role is to determine has there been a breach of the code and is it serious. Final point that I'd like to make here, which I will come back to with some concluding comments, is that this code recommends that council accept the report of the investigator as binding, and that council recognises its role is to determine the penalty only. I'll come back to that point because it was one that was a wee bit different, and you'll recall this, Hilary, when we had a workshop here, so I'll just briefly return to that. So that's the key. If you had a chance to look through the actual recommended code, those are the key components of the actual complaint process. But some comments. Firstly, Andrew, having reviewed it, workshop with you, and having met with Lee, his critique of the 2019 code as it exists, your current code, I think is reasonable. It is not an easy code to implement. So it's consequently, I do recommend that you make this change. While I have said there was high congruence, there is two matters, which I think is probably the strongest parts or the key parts of what I'm recommending that you need to have a view on. I mentioned already that I've tried to simplify the process. So if an independent investigator is needed, their role is to conclude simply, is there a breach and is it serious? It also means potentially that if in investigating a breach, they may conclude there has been no breach. So in other words, it's pretty simple in that sense. And I've also said that I find that the definition or the discussion around materiality in the 2019 code problematic. If a breach of the code occurs, the real question is it serious or is it not serious? The idea of materiality is an unnecessary complication to it. And so I'm recommending to you that you remove that idea, that it's simply a breach and is it serious? And also the process is simplified where there's this idea of a preliminary assessment and a full report. The way the code was written, the investigator virtually has to do a full review to be able to conclude on a preliminary assessment. And it seems crazy if the preliminary assessment is solely to try and work out actually is there a breach in the first place. The second part you might want to consider about is my recommendation that council's bound by the investigator's report. And this comes back to probably the one area where I'm directly recommending something different to that which we discussed in this room, Hilary. I think the view was, in a sense, I think if I recall correctly the discussion, you should have the right to be able to actually say, well, actually, that's what the investigator thinks, but we see it differently. I discussed this at some length and with a couple of colleagues, particularly with Len. And I have, in my view, weighing up the discussion I've had, said actually I would want to differ with respect with that opinion. On the basis that actually you have said one of your objectives is to depoliticise the process. If council can reject the investigator's opinion, you have automatically politicised the process right at the sharp end. So I would say that the second thing is an investigator's report is always a weight of evidence and information that they have received. You won't necessarily be privy to all of that without extensive discussion and review with the investigator. So again, I would recommend that actually, while you express to me a preference over that, I would suggest that actually you amend your views, that you accept the investigator's report, recognising the key role you have is based on their advice around whether there has been a breach, and if that is a serious breach, you have a very key role to work out what is the penalty. I think then the other thing that I would just like to make a couple of final comments, Andrew, was if you adopt this code, I just want to reflect your complaint process is substantially different to that which LGNZ, Local Government New Zealand, has recommended. In other words, the 2019 approach is straight out of their guidance. This is different to what they are recommending. However, they haven't gone through the whole process the LGC has done last year. It hasn't gone through a process that you have asked me to do this year. And I would think there's actually good reasons to say this is relatively consistent with where the LGC is heading, albeit it wants to do more work. But I just want to reflect to you that it is a different process, but it's consistent with your desires and particularly your objectives around what is an effective code compliance, which was that there's good fairness and you adhere to your objectives. My final comment, Andrew, is you asked me to undertake a narrow review. So I'm not expressing any view about the overall fit for purpose of the total code in its own right. So I would urge you that if you choose to follow my recommendation to adopt this code, do keep an eye on where the LGC is going, if it goes anywhere at speed. And can I just put a small sort of red flag in, as an experienced reviewer of complaints, one area that is particularly problematic for councils, I'm not necessarily suggesting for Otago region, is the use of social media. And you folk have the standard social media statements that come out of the LGNZ one. I think there's general acceptance that they may not be up to date. I haven't looked at that, it's not part of the complaint process, but I do want to reflect as an aside, that's the case. Andrew, that's my key points. I'm obviously open to questions.
Awesome. Thanks very much. Is it fair to say, to summarise, what you're recommending is a more simple, certain, non-politically influenced, independent process?
Yes, that's indeed correct.
Cool. Kate, then Hilary, and then Brian.
Thank you for your report, and I appreciate that the report's come from Amanda, I think. So it's a question from either of you, or both of you, the two questions that come out from that is, one is, should we also be referring this to the LGC or LGNZ? And the second part is, should we, given your conversation then about social media that requires some thinking, also be moving that we advise, we come up with a policy before October the 8th, perhaps, that we may recommend to the next council on social media. Either of you.
Amanda, can I say, I'm very comfortable if you want to advise the LGC. To be honest, I've already had some discussions with them, Kate, but that's been informal enough to understand where they're going.
Yeah.
And I haven't given them the courtesy of saying I've arrived at a different place, or rather a different place to the LGNZ code. But that's because of the high congruence between what you want, what I've experienced, and what Len viewed from his review of the 17 code. So yes, I think it's not unreasonable to do that, and that would make some sense. The social media one, I'm almost sort of saying, Kate, I would tread carefully in that area.
Oh, yeah. As councillors, we should always.
Well, I think it's one that certainly there would be good grounds for there to be a sectoral sponsored, dare I say, paid for review, given it is such a current medium and one which the standard LGNZ approach is challenging.
Thank you.
Amanda, did you want to add to that in any way, shape, or form?
Just to say, I think it would be useful to pass if you do adopt the code today. I think it would be really useful.
Sorry, Amanda.
If you do adopt the code today, I think it would be really useful to pass it to LGNZ and local government commissions that they've got it, because LGNZ are currently developing the refreshing template ahead of elections. So I think it might help your thinking if you want to look at it. And on the social media policy, over to you.
Well, I'm certainly happy to move with that 5th one. Bang, do you want me to send it, Di, or? I've got a plan. I don't need to type anything. No.
Okay, can you hold that thought? Okay, we're going to Hillary, Brian, then Michael Laws.
Okay, I've got a plan which I would like to move, and somebody wants to add to it. I'd like to move 1 of the recommendations, 2 of the recommendations, 3 of the recommendations without changes, 4 adopts the code as it is there, 5 appoints the independent member of audit and risk to be that independent person referred to, because we need to have somebody as soon as we adopt this, and 6 that we refer our then adopted code and probably how we got there to LGNZ or wherever it's appropriate, so as they understand how we've got to that, and that may help them in their whatever. So that's 6, which is in 3 without changes, and 5 is the independent member of the Audit and Risk Committee should be the independent person, namely Andrew Douglas, and 6 refer this whole paper and its result to LGNZ.
And LGC.
Yeah, LGNZ
Commission.
and LGNZ. The commission, sorry. Commission
Local Government Commission.
Local Government Commission.
Right. I'm happy to second that.
So are those the 5 and the 6 that were missed out in the numbers here?
5 and the 6 that were, yes,
We've
but
gone from 4 to 7.
So I think Di's got the essence of what.
no, the others are the others here aren't.
Numbers.
No, but the 7 is.
One at a time, please.
That's right.
So you've got the floor, Hillary. So
Yeah.
you've
I fully
expressed the additional recommendations, and you're moving essentially the ones on the audit paper plus the 2 additional ones,
Yes.
correct? You have your second, okay?
Yep.
So can I just go back? So we'll just park that. Can we just go back and finish off the questions? We've got Brian, then Michael Laws.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
2 questions, if I may. The first one just follows on from Hillary. Hillary's proposing, I mean, I like the fact, the independent person, but my question is, we've appointed this independent person to go and audit and risk because they had good audit and risk skills. Now we're saying this person with good audit and risk skills has also got the appropriate skills to sit in this type of code of conduct situation. And I wouldn't assume for a minute that they were the same skills, Bruce. That's the question. Am I able to ask Bruce that question?
You're proposing, the motion proposes a solution. I have kept within the actual standard form of the code, of the plan code, that an independent person be appointed. And as it says, you would do that. Obviously, this is slightly outside of the traineum, but it's sort of traineum. And I have indicated that person should have an understanding of the sector, of particularly Otago region, and indeed some understanding of perhaps the issues that would come through a complaint. I suggested that person could also be your independent member on the Audit and Risk Committee. That's obviously a conditional on that being appropriate, really, in what you're saying. So I can't comment on whether Andrew would be comfortable with the resolution. That would be
my question is, I mean, I don't know that
Andrew is comfortable.
Oh, you spoke, yes,
I have spoken to him,
got the skills,
and he has the skills. And I think usually the sort of person you would appoint for that role would have these skills. That's why you appoint them. It's some of the same skills that you would be looking for.
Brian, I was going to turn your microphone on.
No, fair enough. And the next one was just on page 50, where it says that the process for considering the investigator's report, it says that the investigator's report will be considered by the full council, excluding the complainant, the respondent, and any other interested members. And I was trying to find a definition for interested members, because I can imagine a situation where there's some collateral damage, whether, like if there's going to be others on the floor. So how do you do that? Because it refers to pecuniary interests and conflicts of interest, which I wouldn't necessarily assume. I can just imagine. So how do you do that in a sort of fair way?
I haven't defined it. Okay. So your point about interest. Firstly, this is not referring to any interest that you may or may not have under the Members' Interest Act, or indeed even potentially a non-financial interest, which is really around the law of bias. I think I would encourage you, unless you were to find this difficult, the independent person would be would certainly define who was or wasn't interested. I think actually it becomes pretty obvious from the nature of the complaint that you would receive, and I haven't tried to cover off what could all those various ways and natures of the complaint be. Essentially, generally with complaints, it is clearly the complainant and the respondent. I'm just allowing for the fact that there may be a third, fourth, fifth person that could be involved, in which case you would logically and reasonably ask them to stand aside.
Oh, thank you.
Michael Laws. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions here, and it seems to me that one of the things that this code review doesn't do is reconcile the inherent conflict between the Bill of Rights Act and the constriction upon the individual liberties, the freedom of speech in particular, of elected members. If I can take you to sections 5.2 and then to section 6.2. So they are on my, 59, I think, and 57 of the council papers, but it's sections 5.2 and 6.2. Now, in good part, the reason we're having this review is because of the Code of Conduct report, a complaint that was brought against me by the Chief Executive last year. And it relates to both these two sections and was dealt with in the Dryburgh report. And I'm still at a loss as to how it's been reconciled with this new Code of Conduct. If I can take you to the bullet point on 5.2, relationships with staff as the headline, it's the fourth bullet point. Treat all employees with courtesy and respect and avoid publicly criticising any employee. Okay. Marie Driver, not Marie Driver, her daughter, the lady said that, thank you, said that she interpreted that to mean that if you were to name an employee and to criticise them, as distinct from to employees' actions, the Clutha inquiry is obviously the pertinent one in this particular case. And I still don't see a reconciliation or an explanation of that. Is a member allowed to criticise staff actions publicly or not?
I don't think my brief, Michael, was to actually make that reconciliation. That is something, and for the record, I have read Ms. Dyberg's opinion on the complaint. That's actually ultimately for the investigator to actually assess for themselves. Having said that, the Local Government Commission has recognised that as part of its work, this is an active piece that it does in effect, to use your words, have to reconcile. But how it would do that and in what way it would recommend councils adopt that, we'll have to wait and see. But in terms of a complaint process, the complaint process is setting out the general approach and the way in which a complaint would be considered. If an investigator was dealing with a similar situation to the complaint against you, they would have to take into account and reconcile indeed the point you've made. The code doesn't do that.
So we are adopting a new code today if the recommendations are passed. Can I ask that, and if I go to 6.2, which is media comment on members' own behalf, it stresses that elected members are free to express a personal view in the media at any time, but then lists these series of rules. There are, 1, 2, 3 bullet points there as to what that's compromised or militated by. So you're saying to me, you're going to leave it to an investigator, the Local Government Commission, or can we at least do that ourselves so that we're clear about what we're adopting? What do you think?
I think a couple of things here, Michael. One is, in essence, I have only dealt with, because of my terms of reference, with what I might call colloquially the back half of the code, which is simply how do you undertake a complaint in a way that addresses Len's critique and the expressions of interest from the workshop, in my experience. The part you're dealing with, in effect, is the front half. And yes, as far as I understand from the Act, this is something which council can define for itself. But I am being perhaps a wee bit cute, but I am being upfront that actually I've considered that your question is relevant, but it wasn't relevant to my work because it wasn't dealing with the back half.
Okay, thank you.
It's all the questions, unless there are any more that. No, nothing. So go back to Hillary. So you've moved 6 recommendations, I think.
Where can we read that?
We're going to put it up on the screen in a moment. Oh, sorry, Kevin, you're on the list. Sorry, beg your pardon.
Sorry, it might only be a typo, and Amanda could probably go to it.
It's my typing, probably, Kevin. So let me take that on this one, man.
Page 104, local government, and down there on D, on bullet point D, it says it's lawfully entitled to receive, and it's got 0.890. That, I mean, that might be just a slip of a.
I can check, sorry.
It's page 104.
It's the appendix B.
Point D.
There's 2 Ds. Which one is it?
Oh, Local Government Act 2002.
It's the second, this is first lot.
The first D.
The first D.
And the last word has got received and docked in 890.
Yeah, I think that'll just be a transposition.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's what I've just.
There was a fair bit of cutting and pasting here, Kevin, so I'm sorry about
I don't think it's up something you've
It
done.
was a poor rate of remuneration for you.
that.
Okay, Michael Dinker.
Thanks, Andrew, and particular thanks to you, Bruce. I think you've done a thoroughly sound job. Your advice is excellent. I'll be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll have the 6 recommendations up on the screen in a moment, but Hilary, did you want to speak to those recommendations on the basis that the 2 extra, you've got your head round those, even though you can't see them?
I think
I'm sure you
it's,
have. It's the independent, the addition of the independent person being the
and to refer it to
independent member from Audit
local
and
risk government commission, whatever it is.
Yep.
I think it's what we hope to achieve when we went into this process. I think it's a good, thorough job. I think with the exception of the Ian Anderson, which seems to keep not popping up, it's pretty fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, publicly, I'm apologetic to Len if I thought I had got rid of those gremlins out of the report. So no intended defence, Mr. Anderson, I can confirm, incredibly helpful.
Thank you. Kat, did you?
I think it would be worth noting that we should be thanking Len. It would be worth noting our appreciation to Mr. Anderson QC, for his contribution as well.
So an additional recommendation?
I just want to do it as part of the motion. I don't think it needs to line.
No,
Yeah,
that's
thank
fine.
you.
It's fine. No, fair enough. Are there any other speakers?
Yes, there is. Sorry.
Michael Laws?
I asked a question. Now I'm going to speak, if I may.
Certainly. All yours.
Thank you so much. Listen, first of all, this is no criticism of the report or its, and I think it's materially improved the code of conduct. So let me say that straight up front. Anything that de-escalates tension and intervenes early to resolve disputes between staff and governance is a good thing. So good, excellent. But I am disappointed that we are not going to be reconciling the most important thing here from my perspective as an elected member. It's the concept of freedom of speech. And it's also the concept of accountability. So the obvious example, let's go and use the Clutha inquiry again. The obvious example is if staff do something wrong, or I do something wrong. But in this particular case, staff do something wrong. Should an elected member have the right to publicly comment on that or not? And that issue is still not reconciled in this revised code of conduct. It still seems to be an affront to an individual elected member's right not only to represent their community, but to access the full range of an elected member's responsibilities, including the freedom of speech under the Bill of Rights Act. And this still has the capacity to shut down elected members and stop them from criticising and holding to public account staff actions that may be injurious, wrong, illegal, or muddle-headed, or any combination thereof. And there is nothing in these resolutions today, and numbers 1 to 6, that seeks to reconcile that fundamental conflict between respecting staff integrity and impartiality and between a member's constitutional rights, and they are constitutional rights, to freedom of speech. Indeed, this code of conduct still would appear to inhibit those rights. I don't know how you're going to deal with it. You could put a 7 and say refer the issue of Bill of Rights Act and members to the local government review or whatever. But I am no better off as an elected member as a result of this revised code of conduct. I might get an earlier resolution if there was a complaint against me or any other one of us, but I won't, in actual fact, have I'll still have my basic freedom to speech and to thought impinged and inflicted upon by this revised Bill of Rights Act. With this code of conduct. And I draw this to the attention of you all. The idea that we are somehow constrained from commenting upon wrongdoing because there is a code of conduct is not what a code of conduct should ever do.
Thank you. I'll just make a brief comment. Based on what Laws has just said, the way I see a code of conduct, and I really appreciate what you've done for us, Bruce, to get us to this point, because we essentially had a code of conduct that wasn't fit for purpose, and now we've got one in terms of a clear process when there is a complaint to be dealt with. But I see it as a document that provides direction for councillors, and I suggest that we take a cautious and conservative approach rather than perhaps on the edge approach. So that's the way I see this document. That's the way I will. It's the way I read it, and it's the way I'll respect it going forward. It's a framework for us to work within, and there are consequences if we step over the line. So I'm comfortable where it's at. Any other speakers before I go back to Hilary for right of reply? If not, Hilary, Kevin, and back to Hilary. A microphone.
I'm just thinking, I was breathing, but I didn't want you to hear me inhale deeply. Look, I'm a wee bit more comfortable than Councillor Laws in that I draw on 5.2, which is relationships with staffs. And I think that is the key part that we've got to get right first, is to ensure that we are adhering to that part of the code, which is simply raising any initial concerns with the chair or with the chief executive to ensure that process is going right. And I think if we've got that process going right, it would probably negate the need for us to make remarks to the media that may be seen as a breach of that code. So I think within the code, there's some very good steps for us to work through before we got to in a position where we may feel that we may be in a breachy position, if I could use that term. So I'm comfortable with where it sits. Thank you.
Thank you. Hilary, your right reply.
Just briefly, sort of in response rather than in reply to Michael Laws's concerns, I think there is another bit to this. This is our code and our behaviour. There's another sort of thing that would provide a certain amount of symmetry rather than the asymmetry that it has at the moment, which is that it is appropriate for us to have expectations also of staff, and they are not to do with this code, but that we would like to think that similar sorts of expectations would be on staff. And I think that's something for us to think about with whoever is the chief executive from time to time or whatever, to see whether we can find a proper procedure for us if we have any concerns when it's in the other direction, which is not, as I say, part of this code. But I think that if we start having a look there and think what expectations we have of each other, we may address some of Michael Laws's issues, and we may not. But I think that's something that we should be thinking about too, as just between ourselves, and how we have a procedure where if there's issues, we have a way through them without them turning into something bigger than we would like them to be.
Okay, your right of reply. So happy if the 6 recommendations are put all at once? Okay, I'll do that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
No.
Carried. Thank you very much, Bruce. I really appreciate you getting us to this point. All the best for whatever's ahead of you.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you very much, and I wish you folk well with this as well too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seconded the last motion.
Okay. So moving on to 8.3.
Have
order
you
of
moved the
candidates.
recommendation?
I'll second it.
Okay. In that mood, okay. Moved by Kate, seconded by Hillary. So that's the 8.3 order of candidate names on voting papers. Notes the report. Approves the continued use of random order for candidate names on voting documents and any by-election voting documents for the 2022 triennial election. Any discussion? If not, I'll put the motion, both motions. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, Amanda, for that report.
Yes.
Moving on to 8.4, land and water governance group structure. This is the paper is to update the structure of governance group for land and water regional plan, providing permanent seat for Ngāi Tahu Ki Murahiku. The recommendations outlined. So we've got a couple of options in terms of recommendation 2. Sorry.
One, 2.
Close. Yeah, so on page 114 and 115, that refers to 2 options, and the recommendation that's on the audit paper is option 2. Hillary, this is questions,
Yes.
and sorry, the paper is from Amanda, I think. Anita, sorry, big page.
Selena and Anita.
Sorry.
Welcome back, Tom.
Sorry.
Tom online.
Tom's back.
Sorry, I hadn't even looked up. Welcome to Anita. Welcome, Tom. Anita, in your hands, briefly, would you like to introduce the report? Then I'll go to Hillary for a question.
Absolutely, thank you, Chair. So this report just brings hopefully the end point of a discussion that the Chair started when he invited Murahiku to join the governance group. That invitation went to mana in, I think, April, and now we've got this paper which does recommend a place on the governance group for the land and water plan for Murahiku. There's probably not much else I need to add. The paper has been reviewed by both Ōkaha and Taumarama, and they are comfortable with the contents and the recommendations. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Anita. I did forward the paper to Edward as well, and he came back to me and said he was comfortable with the what's proposed. Hillary.
The recommendation seems to me that it doesn't necessarily follow, and it just might be my reading of it, what page 114 said, because what I think we've got now is 2 permanent councillors and 2 with whatever FMU, and 4 Renaka representatives. So 8 people at each meeting, and I'm not sure whether they all turn up, but there we go. The proposal says accepting where this is going would then result in 4 councillors, 2 Kaitahu Otago and 1 of Murahiku, which is not the same as the recommendation that says approve the establishment of a permanent Murahiku position, which suggests 9 people, the current 8 plus 1.
Sorry, the
Sorry, what's the question exactly, Councillor Calvert? Sorry.
Well, the question is, currently we've got 8 on it. The proposal on page 114 says accepting another one would result in 4 + 2 + 1, namely
Right.
7, which is 4 councillors, 2 Otago, 1 Murihiku, which is 7, and it's a different, it's not 4 + 4, it's 4 + 2 + 1. And then the recommendation just says approves a permanent position of somebody.
I think one of,
Yeah, we'll just go
I'm going to help you.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
it's one of the issues in paragraph 21, you've got 2 representatives from Kaitahu Kia Taiko, currently Mr. Ellison and Dr. Carter, but I thought it was actually Hawani, Langsbury.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, that's
So-
correct.
So
So
through
that's-
you, Chair, there is a mistake in that. So just in terms of the 4 and 2, the terms of reference indicate that there are up to 4 roles for Kaitahu Kia Tago. Only 2 of those are used at this point in time, and that is Hawani Langsbury and Edward Ellison. The recommendation of the paper doesn't relate to the existing governance group structure. All it does is seeks to add 1 role for Murihiku. So it doesn't touch the existing terms of reference in the composition except to add the 1 place.
So that's 9.
So it could be, so at the moment the structure is 2 ORC councillors and the revolving FMU councillors, which was intended to be 2 as we did them, and then up to 4 for Otago, but only 2. As I said, only 2 are there at the moment. That's all they have the capacity for. But they potentially could exercise that and go right up to 4.
So to answer the question, that's 9.
Up to 9.
Okay, so Kate, this relates to this.
It's another question. It's about that. So the report suggests in paragraph 12 that additional Runaka representatives and any ORC councillor can attend the meeting of the group as of right. And this reflected in a meeting we had last week when there was apparently a meeting that none of us, only the members of the 2 permanent members knew about. So the question is it the intent that all of the councillors will be told when these meetings are, in which case I'm happy with it. But if the balance is 2, because that's all that's going at the moment, or know about the meetings, and there is no, my problem is possibly it's outside of scope of this paper, but the problem is there's some suggestions in here that we've got 4 representatives here. I'm not sure that we have had 4 representatives, nor am I sure that we're ever given notice that we can attend the meetings. So it's just that I'd be really happy to attend if I could, but I didn't know last week's meeting was on.
Can I just clarify from the chair? My understanding when you and Gary dealing with
Keeping you, I
Catchment
get
and
that.
Upper Lakes, we had 4
Yep.
sitting in on those governance meetings. Might only be 1 or 2 or 3 governance meetings, but then you were at the same time you were attending those public sessions, workshops,
Yeah,
etc.
that's when there's an effect new work. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So that has actually been in play.
This is about paragraph 12.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
It means the open invitation, and
Yeah.
they didn't know the meeting was on.
Yep.
So through you, Chair, and Councillor Wilson, for your information, Councillor Robertson has passed those questions on to us, and we are intending to go back to the governance group with some solutions for all of that. So the open attendance was originally discussed when back in 2019 when the group was formed, just in terms of making sure that people could sit on that group. And we are looking at ways of making that notification more obvious. The obvious one is the governance calendar, and so getting the meetings put on that. So we're just working through some of that now.
The question for you as a member of that, if I may ask, is it appropriate that we've got 2 Dunedin reps on, I mean, I appreciate we're all councillors for the whole region when we're appointed, but we've got 2 Dunedin-based people on that governance group. We've got 3 of the largest rivers in New Zealand go through Otago, and we're not necessarily using the councillors as a conduit of that information and are using our roles as community-based people. when you've got the Tairi, the Clutha, Mata'ao, and the Waiteki as examples of huge rivers with huge catchments that really need as good a connections with the community as we can afford it, to make sure that I'm just trying to get the messaging as best we can. And I'm just raising that as a concern. If you think it's out of scope, I'm absolutely fine to deal with it at another meeting.
I don't want to get distracted, but I understand what you're saying, and that was the whole idea of having the list of FMUs and allocation to a councillor for each FMU to ensure that there was a broad representation of councillors across that work, that FMU work. So take your point. We can pick up on those couple of issues that you've raised that are now being filtered through to staff and will be dealt with going forward. So is it appropriate for Gretchen and I to be the councillors that are there all the time? Well, that's your decision, council decision at the end of the day. It was a couple of years ago that we were put in those position in that position. If it needs to change, well, so be it. If it's on the basis that you get better representation by having not two councils that are Dunedin based that are at all those meetings.
It's not a criticism, it's just making sure that we are doing the best job. And I don't want to take away from the purpose of this report, which I'm really, really happy, especially as a Catlins FMU person, to have Murihiku on board. They were fantastic down there. And it was one of our best consultations you could have had. People down there loved having them there. It was brilliant.
Thank you. Brian, then Michael Laws, then Michael Beaker.
Yeah, I'll make it quick. Yeah, I'm also, positive about Murihiku being there. Of course, it's the right to be there. And just to concur with Kate, but, Mr. Chair, yeah, because I actually questioned the example that you sort of gave. Like initially, I was on the Cardrona and Arrow, and I think I attended one of these meetings. But later down the track, the whole system changed. So when I was on Dunedin Coastal, I never received an invite. So I'm actually, with Anita listening and so forth, I'm actually hoping that the way forward is that it's treated the same as mana to mana, and that any councillor can have the opportunity to attend in the future without denigrating your and Gretchen's role in that continuity. Thank you.
Good suggestion. Michael Laws.
Thank you. I'm trying to clarify clause 21, which still seems very confusing to me. From what I read, so if I can take you to clause 22 in the bullet points, there are 4 RC councillors on, basically 2 who are permanent. They're councillors Noon and Robertson, and then the other 2 revolve around them. So that's 2 plus 2. But they're not always the same people. It's just there's only 2 will continue to be permanent. Then if we take you to the next bullet point, from Kaitahu, which is a sort of Otago sub-tribe, currently that's Mr. Ellison and Dr. Carter. So that's, is that right?
Hoani Lansbury is the second.
Hoani Lansbury instead of Dr. Carter.
Correct.
Yeah. And then, so that's fine. But I've just been informed, and I didn't know that, so I'm just trying to clarify that they're actually not entitled to 2. They're entitled to 4. They've only taken up 2. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yes. Good. Thank you. Yep. So that's sort of 2 plus 2 as well, really. And then there's one representative that's proposed from Ngaitahu Ki Murihiku, being one of the board members representing, I guess those are 3 Runaka in the south of our region. So that now takes us to an additional 1. And then the next bit really gets me. Additional Runaka representatives in any ORC council can attend any meeting of the group. So I'm seeking clarification. How many Runaka representatives would that be?
Through you, Chair, I don't know the answer to that. It would depend on each area.
How many Runaka are in the Otago region?
When it talks about Runaka representatives, it's talking about representatives from Kaitahu Ki Murihiku or Kaitahu Ki Otago, and I don't know what the numbers are.
Well,
so paragraph 21 just comes out of the terms of reference.
We're not trying to trip anybody up here. I'm just trying to clarify, because it could be a very unwieldy governance group if that was 10 or 12, particularly when you add any ORC councillor as well. And it seems that the problem is the way in which the governance reference group is set up. It doesn't seem, I mean, it could potentially have about 30 or 40 people in the room from what I can work out. Is that right?
Or on Zoom.
Well, I'm not sure whether it's quite that number, but anyway, look, my understanding, and I'm just reflecting on the last mana to mana discussion when we talked about this issue, it's really having the opportunity for the representatives, whether they're iwi reps and councillor reps, to be in the room for the discussion, and the decisions that are made at this in this forum are not so much around decisions like policy decisions or any decisions relating to consultation, timing of consultation or whatever. It's more of an update of the actual work programs that the staff are currently involved in. And when it comes to consultation, is it, a general update, stage 1 consultation is complete, stage 2 is triggered mid-year, early July or there or thereabouts. So I don't see the forum as a decision-making forum. It's very much around a forum for discussion. Well, that's the way I see it operates. That's the way I experience it. So why am I saying that? It's simply around if the numbers that are outlined in 21 actually crystallise to actual physical numbers around the table to the max, I personally don't see that as a problem.
Okay, but can I just push back a bit on your explanation? I take you, Andrew, to clause 2 of this paper. Now, it's not what you just explained. The LWRP Governance Group, a subcommittee of the Strategy and Policy Committee, was set up to guide the prioritising of freshwater issue and outcomes and provide policy guidance in the development of the LWRP. That's a damn sight more than consultation to me.
I call it a forum for discussion because any major issues would have to come back to strategy and planning. I mean, strategy planning is the committee of which this subcommittee reports to. So I would have thought, taking your point, was set up to guide the prioritising of freshwater issues and outcomes. And I would have thought any decision making would be coming back to strategy and planning.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify that. Okay, so that was a question and you've just clarified it. Thank you for that. But then the other thing is, can I ask the obvious question? If the two representatives from Kaitahu, Mr. Ellison and Mr. Lansbury, are going to those meetings, and Kaitahu is not taking up its additional 2 spots, for very good reason, I would expect, why doesn't the representative of Ngaitahu, Murihiku, simply take up one of the slots there?
So through you, Chair, we did actually talk about this. I understand it's not tikanga to do it that way, and so my understanding is that Murihiku, in their own right, have their own invitation and their own opportunity to join and their own place around that table.
So let me get this right. Ngaitahu, who are an iwi of their own right, encompassing the entire South Island, of which Otago is a sort of a sub-region or a hapu, if you like, an enlarged hapu. They need separate representation for the hapu that represents Kaitahu, the sort of Dunedin base, and separate representation for basically South Otago in that area. Is that right?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. Can't remember what the order was.
Kevin first.
Kevin. Oh, Kevin, Michael, Decker, Gretchen, Hillary.
I don't want to confuse us, but there's 2 parts to a target that I see, as one's down the south and one's up the north, and we have no. Is the same invitation going to be extended to the Waitaha from the Waitaki through their Ranaka at either Waiho or Arowhenua, or even more. I think Moreki is covered by Edward's team, but further north, when we are dealing with the Waitaki River and the lands around the Waitaki River, which are those are the affected peoples of that area. And I notice even Mayor Hawkins this morning mentioned the influence of the Waitaha on the northern parts of this province.
So through you, Chair, my understanding is that Kaitahu Ki Otago currently represent all of the areas north. They did talk about potentially bringing someone on from slightly further north, so from Moiraki or that space, but they manage that themselves between the current representatives.
So north of Moiraki, which is the Waiho, which so no one is, and so that's in Ekan country, but borders and their traditional fishing areas and food gathering areas are the Waitaki River, and both sides of the river, no one's representing them.
You're on mute, Anita.
Sorry, I've got a sticky mouse. I'd have to defer to Kaitahu Ki Otago, Councillor Malcolm. I don't want to speak for them. My understanding is that they are comfortable that their representation covers the area that they have interest in. But in terms of where that boundary sits or doesn't, I wouldn't like to provide any more answers on that. But happy to go back and have that conversation with them if that's what you'd like us to do.
I would be comfortable with that, Chair, if that is appropriate.
Yep, noted. Yep, happy to.
Thanks for the explanation. Thank you.
Michael Decker.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew, and thanks, Anita, for this very good paper. I like where it's going. I'm mystified, though, by who is the convener of this LWRP group. Who decides when it will meet? It's always been a bit of a mystery for me as to when and where it's convened. And when it does meet, who is the chair and how is that position determined? Who decides on the chairing of each meeting of the group, or is there a permanent chairperson? So there's two questions there. Who convenes it and who chairs it when it meets?
So through you, Chair, you could probably answer these yourself, but the terms of reference elected Andrew Noon and there's co-chairs and we were alternating chairing. And in terms of when they meet, so that was, I mentioned earlier, we're really aware there's not enough visibility around that. And so we're just working on some solutions for that now so that everyone is aware when and where they meet. The frequency of meetings is also agreed by the governance group committee.
Yeah. The terms of reference do not explicitly state a frequency. The terms of reference, they state that the frequency will be determined by the workload almost. So when there's a lot of work to be done on FMUs, the group would meet more often.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Anita. Thanks, Tom. Gretchen.
Yeah, we are talking about today adding one member from Murihiku, which is great for that. The other things we've been talking about are that this is a subcommittee of the Strategy and Planning Committee. So it reports, as you've said, to that committee and doesn't make decisions, it just feeds back. So that is happening. We've actually only got about 5 months left before we have a new council and we determine what our committee structures will be. So we're talking about that period of time. So how many meetings would that be? Probably not all that many. So whilst this is a really big issue because we're on a tight time frame for the water plan, that's the period of time we're talking about. The other things we've talked about are important, and that is who represents who on this committee in terms of ourselves, which isn't the exact subject of this paper, but 2 FMU councillors from the council is what it says at the moment. But at the moment, we've got pretty much all of the FMUs going at once. So yeah, Michael Laws just talked about how many iwi could potentially be there, but we could also have basically everyone around this table here at any one time, but the provision is for 2 people. So we've got a few issues to talk about as a land and water governance group, and we're aware of that, and I've raised those with Anita as she's mentioned. So ASAP, we need to talk about visibility of meetings, who we want to be at those meetings, and can it be everyone or not, and what sort of format is actually going to work for us in this short time frame, and what are we aiming to actually do, which will determine frequency as well. So yeah, there's a wee bit to do, and we need to report that back, I think, through strategy and planning, so it's visible too, and people are all aware what they can expect in those 5 months. Thanks.
Thank you. Hillary.
I've got a question which might help us on the way through, because I think Anita said that Tahu Ki Otago had not taken up 2 of its members, and I wonder whether we can, in that case, reconstitute the membership being 2 Ngāi Tahu Kai Tahu Ki Otago, 1 from the south, for want of a better description, leave open the question without coming back to us to have 1 from the north if there was 1 that people wanted when Anita's talked to them. And that seems to me it would satisfy most things, and have that group of what would be 7 and possibly 8 if there was a northern one as members, and the other people, if they wanted to come along from the variety of the places that had members, but other members of those would be able to attend but not as members. And that could be any number on Zoom or something. I don't see that would be a problem, but the membership would be 2 permanent councillors, 2 FMU councillors on a rotating basis, 2 Kai Tahu Ki Otago, and 1 from down south, and with the potential for 1 from the northern area if they wanted to come along. Would that work? Because I think your description, Anita, was they haven't picked up the other 2 memberships. So yeah.
So through you, Chair, the governance group structure was approved by resolution, by council resolution. So to change, hence why this paper is here. So we've had to change. We're seeking to change it by council resolution. If we were to seek to change it again, it would need a paper that was different to this paper. So this paper focuses mostly on Murahiku's representation. No issue with going back and, opening this up again and having another look, if that's what you would like us to do. But I don't know within this paper. Just, I'm not sure that it's within the scope of this paper. But
sorry to interrupt. I think it's directly in the scope of this paper, because 21 says the governance group would then result in the following membership, and that's exactly what I've described. So I can't see how that could possibly be out of scope, and we could resolve to follow 21 today.
My feeling, and fair comment, my feeling we are getting away from the basis of this discussion, and I've just heard what you've just said, and to justify what I've just said then is that it started off with a conversation, a letter to try and resolve the representation Murahiku and the representatives from those runaka, and it did go to mana to mana, and the issues such as North Otago representation and those sorts of things were discussed. So I feel that this paper in front of us has quite a foundation of discussion to get to this point. And I don't think we're in the position to deal with what you're suggesting today, which would, I agree, in the future, and I take Gretchen's point, there's probably 4 or 5 months, maybe 3-4 meetings that this group will be actively involved during this triennium, and whether it needs to be re-looked at by the new council as we work through that final 12 months or so for the land and water plan and re-look at that structure then. I just don't think we can do it on the hop right here and now, simply because those conversations have developed basically the foundation for the paper.
Could we lay it on the table to carry out what Anita has said in 21 here? I'm just saying let's do it all at once and just sort it, rather than saying we can only do one corner of it, especially when that description is fully within 21 here.
I would prefer to go back to our partners if there was going to be a rethink of. Which is why I say we can just lay it on the table till next time, with the assumption that we could pick up 21 if Kaitahu ki Otago was happy with that. Yeah, I'll go.
So through you, Chair, the risk with that is it would mean Murihiku would still not have a place at the table. They would still not be able to join the governance group until we brought the paper back again. So that's just for your awareness.
No, thank you. Yeah, I would much prefer that we deal with what we've got in front of us today and
it's in front of us.
Yeah, Gretchen.
I was just going to move the recommendations as they
And
are.
I will second it.
So moved and seconded.
Yeah.
Brian, you speaking, or you had a question?
Yeah, look, I actually see what Councillor Calvert is suggesting. While on one level it might seem to be a practical.
So is it a question you've got, or are you speaking to the motion? Because we'll stay with questions if you're not speaking to the motion, that's fine. No.
I was simply going to say that I actually look, the way it's a partnership. So basically, this is the way I see it, that we had 4 councils, 2 as permanent, 2 in the FMUs, and they were invited to have 4, and they were invited to have 4. Now, at the time, they felt, well, actually, there's a resource issue, we'll just give 2. But from a mana perspective, they still had the ability to have 4 if they so chose. Now we've got Murihiku, so the balance, but then we've also got the opportunity for councillors to turn up as and when, so it's about mana, it's about partnership without, I just don't like where it was going. Thank you.
Okay, I take it that you're speaking to the motion.
Yeah.
So it was moved by Gretchen, seconded by Alexa, and that's as set out on page 112. That we note the report, we approve the establishment of a permanent Otahu ki Murihiku position on the land and water plan governance group, which may be attended by any one of the board members of Te Ao Marama, representing Rotorua, Runaka, Waihokai, Runaka, and
Oraka, Aparima.
Runaka, thank you. So, any further speakers? Kate, sorry.
I'm really loath to note the report, and that sounds tough, but when it's quite clearly got statements in it which haven't happened, that we haven't been advised of the meetings as councillors and we haven't been able to attend, it makes me feel very uneasy, because the expectation is that we know a whole lot of things that have happened, and what clearly happened last week was we didn't know that happened. We didn't even know that there was a meeting coming up. Now, I have been passionate about the work with the FMU, as all of you have been turning up at more than one. But if we're kept in the dark and yet we're meant to be there facilitating it as the community conduit, I find it really tough to be treated like that. It may be unintentional, and I'm sure it's unintentional, but we are the FMU leads. And I just don't feel like our roles as FMU leads has been given. And so I can't disconnect that from this report. So I personally would prefer to lay the paper on the table. I'm very, very happy to do approve the establishment of this, but I do want to get that stuff fixed and know how we are going to fix it. And if we don't leave it on the paper, I fear that it will not come back. So to that extent, I'd rather do it by division. I know that's painful. I'm not going to vote for number one because I would rather I'm not going to do a procedural motion. I'd rather have that discussion about how we're going to fix this as something we can recommend to a new council to get it right. This land and water plan is going to come to us quickly, and we have to make sure we're doing the best job we can as our FMU leads, and that means us being part of this discussion as well.
And to be fair, Anita has acknowledged the visibility of meetings, etc. So we can do better. And I think
but it's in the paper as a fact.
Yeah.
We can't fix the paper.
Okay. Hillary, then Alexa, speaking to the motion or the motions.
I'm keen on hearing the views of, and therefore having as a group in the room our southern neighbours who share an interest in our water, and I'm very positive about that. I am not positive about a group that has 9 members, of which 4 of them are councillors, when its role is to guide the prioritising of freshwater issues. This is the subcommittee of strategy and planning, and to have 9 people fight, only 4 of them of whom are on our committee as our committee members, doesn't sit nicely with me. It's a recipe for issues because while it doesn't make some decisions and things, if we don't take guidance from where we are supposed to have guidance from, we've been told on several occasions recently that not taking guidance from people who seem to know what they're talking about and may well know what they're talking about much better than us is something that could put us at issue. That is a problem for me, that a place that says they're guiding us on prioritising freshwater isn't actually a usual sort of subcommittee of strategy and planning. So I won't be voting for it, but I am very keen on having our southern neighbours be at that table.
Thank you. Alexa.
I'm not sure how much I can help here, but the main reason I am happy to second this motion is that I think number 2 is of vital importance at this point of our relationship and at this point of our process, and I want to see that happen. I would like to know if there is a way that we can note the report while acknowledging Kate's concerns. And that can't be a question at this point. That's me speaking to the motion. I'm very happy to second it and accept them as it is.
With regards to noting those concerns, I think we can have in the minutes that the General Manager of Policy and Science has acknowledged the visibility isn't as good as it should be with regards to the way the Land and Water Governance Group operates. So I think
we can't change the report, only she can.
Yep. Further speakers? Sorry, I think Michael Laws.
Thank you. I'd just like to endorse what Councillor Calvert has just said, and that is that it is a very important committee. I think you've decried its importance a little bit, Chair Andrew. If you look at clause 2, it's a very important committee in terms of our land and water plan, and I take it very seriously, and I would take recommendations that came from this group very seriously indeed, and I think most would, including our staff. So therefore, it's important to get the membership right, and on the permanent members, from what I can see, there's a clear imbalance and a potential for there to be a majority of non-elected members, people chosen simply for their ethnicity, on that committee. Now, we know it's a bit of a dog's breakfast, that committee. I think that's been acknowledged in the questions today, that it's not ideal. And so there would be no difficulty, it seems to me, in getting it ideal. and bringing it back to, God, the next meeting of the council if necessary. One other thing, though, I just like to say, if the issue here is, oh, we've got to have these people on, we've got to have them on now, we've got to have one representative from the South Otago iwi, or sorry, from the South Otago hapu, on this particular committee, then really it's a physician heal thyself situation, where there are 2 vacant spots sitting there untaken up by Kaitahu Otago, and they could easily just simply give one to make sure that even on a temporary basis they're sitting at the table with one of their slots. So I will not be able to support this motion.
Thank you. Any further speaker? Kevin?
I will support one or two, but I will foreshadow a third motion that will be all councillors be informed of and invited to Land and Water Group governance meetings. Now, the issue we are having is around probably our operational issues within the house, not with the people that we're wishing to bring on board. So I think the third motion that I will bring to the table after this, I would hope that you would support, and I'm sure that from the tenor of this meeting that both staff and members currently on the governance group will understand the importance of us all being on the same page and the willingness of everyone to work together. So I'll support these 2 motions.
Thank you. Any further speakers? If not, just a brief comment from me. I think it's important to remember that it's not just direct issues that Ngāi Tahu ki Murihiku have an interest in. So in other words, south of the border, they're interested also right across like the general provisions and the land and water plan. So it's much broader than just, when you talk about areas. So I think that's just important to keep in mind. Yeah, that's all I was going to add. So moved and seconded. Happy that I think I'll put the first motion on its own first, that we note the report. All those in favour?
Can we have division, please?
Okay. You're okay with that, Bill?
Yep.
And is this option 2 with a third
Sorry, I
part?
didn't go back to Gretchen for a right reply. Did you? Sorry.
No, I had something to say on Kevin's, but that'll be later.
So this is for recommendation 1, that we note the report.
So, Councillor Calvert,
Yes.
Councillor Deaker,
Yes.
Councillor Forbes. Yes. Councillor Laws,
Yes.
Councillor Callagher,
Yes.
Councillor Malcolm,
Yes.
Councillor Noon,
Yes.
Councillor Robertson,
Yes.
Councillor Scott,
Yes.
and Councillor Wilson.
Abstain.
Let's take a moment to come up.
That's all good. Right.
So,
I was going to say motion carried by majority.
Yep.
So then moving on to 2, as set out on page 112. And we'll just follow the division again.
Yeah, Councillor Calvert,
No.
Councillor Deaker,
Yes.
Councillor Forbes,
Yes.
Councillor Laws,
No.
Councillor Callagher,
No.
Councillor Malcolm,
Yes.
Councillor Noon,
Yes.
Councillor Robertson,
Yes.
Councillor Scott,
Yes.
and Councillor Wilson.
Yes.
Recommendation passed by majority. We'll now go to Kevin, moving the third one, that all councillors be informed of the Land and Water Regional Planning Governance Group. I just can't remember what the second one was.
All councillors be informed of and invited to Land and Water Governance Group meetings.
Cool.
Councillor Calvert,
Yes.
Oh, did I get a seconder for that?
Oh,
Sorry.
sorry.
Sorry, Alexa.
Can I just ask something? Sorry about that.
Yeah, clarification.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm just wondering whether the term, oh, sorry, I think people can hear anyway, but whether the terms of reference allow for that. I'm not trying to be picky because I think it's fine, but and I'm supportive of that. But I think the terms of reference, is it there?
No, the report says that we are.
That
So-
we're allowed to, yeah.
Yeah,
but-
it's been happening. That's why it's, yeah, so I presume we can.
So through you, Chair, if it would be useful, I've just got the terms of reference open there and I've just said they need to come back to the next governance group. So what the terms of reference say is the membership will consist of, so the group will consist of a maximum of 10 members as follows: 2 permanent ORC councillors, 4 permanently appointed runaka with at least 2 attending each meeting, and then revolving FMU councillors. And then underneath that, and the paper wasn't as clear as it should be, is additional runaka and council representatives can attend as of right, as it facilitates succession and allows for expertise. And then third parties may be invited to the group's meeting as required by the group. This is not a public council meeting and it's not open to the public to attend.
Right.
Thank you, Anita.
Well written.
Does that mean that any councillor can be part of the group?
That's
Not
what-
a member, but they can come.
They
no?
come, yeah.
Not a member,
Be in
but
attendance.
Kevin's actually going a step further. He's saying to actually
No.
No,
attend.
he's saying to.
It's silent for the last 2 people. There's
Hang on.
8 and then it's silent as to membership for the last 2.
My understanding is that any councillor can go if they're not part of the
Yeah.
4, let's say the 2 FMU ones, the 2 permanent. Any councillor can go and be in attendance.
Yeah.
And what Kevin's suggesting is that all councillors be informed and invited. I'll out to you with you attend.
Point of clarity, just I gathered from that that the committee was also, if they were of the mind, could invite them to attend as members if they required their expertise or particular knowledge. If I listen to that last part. Sorry, I'm not sure which I need to look at, the one in front of me, one beside me, or the one behind me.
Do you want to just read,
Sorry,
repeat
Anita.
that bullet?
Apologies, Councillor Malcolm, one of me is enough. So additional runaka representatives and any ORC councillor can attend any meeting of the group as of right, as it facilitates succession and allows for expertise in specific areas or FMU's rohe to be shared with the group's members.
We just,
Yeah.
either, no matter who's there. Yeah. So, you happy?
Yeah, everyone's happy.
So you,
I'm happy.
so you
So you don't need to.
you don't need
Point
to.
clarified? No, okay.
So Ken, number 3, no. Okay,
No, well,
Yeah,
no, we're
so
doing, we're doing,
No,
we just need that, because we've sort of said a lot of things that we're going to do, but I just want to put on paper that all councillors will be informed of and invited to the Water Government Group's meetings.
so so you moved up. Alexa,
Second.
seconded, so you want that? Yep. You want that pot?
Yep.
Okay, all those in favour, please say aye.
no.
Against? Carried. What I'm going to suggest, we have a 15-minute break, reconvene at 5 to 4. So we stand adjourned. Welcome back, everybody. We're now up to item 8.5, which is the Plan Change 8 Rural Provisions Approval. This paper is provided for council to approve part of Plan Change 8, discharge management to the regional plan, water for Otago, which is water plan, as amended by the Environment Court decision, and to set a date for the making the plan change partially operative by incorporating and amending provisions into the operative water plan. We've also got a couple of attachments there. One is the Plan Change 8 Regional Plan Water, the Otago partially operative 4th June 2022, and also attachment 2, which is the table of minor and consequential amendments. Welcome to Delana Lee and Anita. Welcome back. Welcome Tom. Welcome back. The recommendations set out there, 5 recommendations. This is obviously a statutory requirement, a statutory step along the way. Anita and Tom, is there anything you want to comment on? Pretty straightforward.
No, pretty straightforward. We'll take it as read. Actually, I would just like to acknowledge the parties to Plan Change 8. So this one was all settled at mediation with some changes to the provisions, but they were things that clarified and improved the provisions. But more importantly, all of those parties, Federated Farmers, Dairy NZ, Fonterra, iwi, all provided evidence in support of ORC at the Environment Court hearing, to the point that the judge actually commented in her decision that it was very unusual. So I think it's really important to acknowledge those parties and the roles that they played in supporting ORC to get these provisions through. So we really appreciate them and the time they took to do that.
Awesome, thanks Anita. And just to confirm that Plan Change 8 essentially will partially be operative June 4th, 2022.
Yes, through you, Chair, that's correct. We're still waiting for a decision on the residential provision. So that was a contested hearing. This one was an uncontested hearing last year. So these parts are ready to go. And just for ease of the consents team and for users, we would like to make these ones operative.
Thank you. Tom, you're all good?
To you, Chair. Yes, I'm all good. Yeah. Also noting that there is another companion piece, which is Plan Change 1 to the waste plan as well, which was part of the omnibus plan change. Again, that is like the remainder of Plan Change 8. Hearings have been held, but we don't have a full decision from the Environment Court, so that will also be made operative at a later stage.
Okay. Thank you. Hilary, then Kate.
I'd like to move the recommendations.
Thank you. So that's the 5.
Well, I was happy to equally move that, but I'd like to add the point that Anita made, with thanks to the stakeholders for the constructive way that mediation worked in getting to that resolution more simply in Plan Change 8 of the rural sections. Fine by me.
Yep, so the move is happy with that. So the additional recommendation, thanks to the stakeholders for getting to the resolution of
For constructively participating in mediation to get to a final resolution by consensus.
By consent.
By consent. Yeah, consent. Yeah.
Consent.
Yeah.
Sorry.
To get to a final resolution by consent.
Thank you for that clarification. So
I would second that motion with that amendment.
Okay. Any discussion? If not, happy that I put the 6 all at once. Okay. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Against? Carried. Okay, moving on to, thank you very much, Anita. Thank you, Tom. Moving on to item 8.6, which is the ORC submission on New Zealand emissions trading scheme, proposed amendments, managing exotic deforestation incentives. The paper is provided to report on the staff submission lodged of the Ministry for Primary Industries consultation managing exotic deforestation incentives, a discussion document on proposals to change forestry settings in New Zealand emission trading scheme, and just remembering that there was a report that went to strategy and planning the last month, which essentially meant that staff were required to or had to lodge the submission to meet the time frame, and obviously the council meeting didn't occur in time for that to be approved. So essentially we're noting the submission that's already been submitted. Warren may not be with us, but Anita is.
Yeah, Warren's here.
Welcome, Warren.
Welcome, Warren.
Yep. Is there anything you wanted to comment on with regards to you, the author of this report? Any comments?
Just very briefly, it's probably just worth noting the point I made in the discussion that our submission aligned quite nicely with some made by our neighbouring regions. So that was, that was pleasing to see.
Good stuff. Thank you. Any other questions? Kevin?
Yeah, look, a very good report and a very good submission, and thanks for taking on board what was relayed to you during workshops and the like. So no, very well done. I just wondered if you did consider, or you have yet available, the FENS report on the Livingston fire of the same day that destroyed that 610 hectares of carbon forestry.
Excuse me.
So through you, Chair, we haven't got our hands on that one, but we're happy to keep looking, or if you can direct us as to where it is. You'll see we've attached one.
Yes.
But that was the one that was most readily available to us.
So subsequent to that, Chair, so would it be too late to send that additional one to it and quoting it, because that's the nub of the, or we're a bit late, are we?
I suspect we're a bit late, but we can follow up, and if you can get the report to us, we can always forward it on, and they can choose to do something with it or not.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you very much. You'll follow that up. Okay. So you've moved, second by Gary. They've noted this report and submission on the Ministry for Primary Industries consultation managers.
Yep.
Afforestation incentives, a discussion document on proposals to change forestry settings in the New Zealand emissions trading scheme. Any discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye. Well, thanks.
Against? Gary? Thank you very much, Warren.
Thank you.
Moving on to 8.7, the Otago Navigational Safety Bylaw 2020 infringement regime. We've got 5 recommendations set out there in front of us. There's also the attachments with the proposed ORC infringement comparison sheet, submission summary from the consultation from last year, and detailed submission responses to that same process. Welcome to Steve. Nice to have you here, Steve. Is there anything you wanted to highlight as the author of the report?
No, not really. It's as is, this supports the navigational bylaw process that we've already gone through a couple of times in the last couple of years. So this is a recommendation to go to the ministry to support those bylaws with an enforcement infringement process.
Have you got any idea of that that step with that goes to the ministry for approval or whatever? Is any idea of the time frame? I was just out of your hands, obviously.
It's out of my hands and for the legal team from here on in, provided we're approved. I believe it's around 2 to 3 months.
And I just had a query with regards to the proposed infringement regime as compared with our neighbours, whether it's ECAN, Environment Southland or Queenstown Lakes in our case, for a like-for-like type infringement in 2 different areas. Do the fines sort of are they comparable or they vary?
They're similar, and the sheets there, the comparison sheets there for CODC, ECAN and Southland alongside ours, and the Queenstown ones. I'd say they're pretty comparable with Queenstown. But we have looked at some of the potential safety factors in some of these and gone a little bit higher where we feel that cases of a real high-end safety nature and of more importance, or potentially more consequence. So one or two in the fine-tuning of it might be a little bit higher than our neighbours, but that's just our thought process on where we think safety is more prevalent than some of the other regions might do. So it's on a reasonable par, I would say, but more aligned with Queenstown than any of the others that currently.
Thank you. Questions for Steve? Hilary?
I'm not sure whether it's for Steve or for Richard, because it says Harbour Master's comments on the consultation. That was you?
Yeah, it was, yes.
So, and you're part of us.
I'm indeed.
So when it says staff response, it means one staff member saying something and here's the response of another staff member.
What page are you on?
Yeah, which page are you referring to?
350.
Yep.
When it does propose that Harbour Master's comments, I'm just wondering whether when there's a staff response.
Sorry, that is the staff response. The Harbour Master's comments are the staff response in this case throughout that last attachment in the
So that's
documentation.
why.
Yeah, sorry if that's confusing.
Okay, so your comments, well, yes, so because it says staff agree with this and then this matter will be considered at next bylaw review. So these are all your...
They are my responses to the, there's a number of singular responses, and then there's the document that you're just referring to, which is a quite comprehensive response to the consultation. And we worked through that essentially to look at whether it was appropriate or not to amend prior to coming to the table here. And those are my responses in each of the individual cases that the person submitting had made.
Oh, right. So what we've got in front of us now is your best advice to us about what they should be.
Indeed. We minded that the Ministry of Transport may well come back with some thought processes around our thought processes, if that makes sense, for a final deliberation.
You know what you're talking about, and here's your...
Hopefully.
Only one other wee question, so that fills me with comfort because you really know what you... there's a one in here at which I'm not sure who gets to decide. Not navigate the vessel unless it is safe to do so and whether conditions are considered to permit safe navigation. So who...
Relating to which number, sorry?
Oh, sorry. 11.1C. So I'm just wondering who considers that things are safe or...
It's a subjective decision-making process for any master of a vessel.
The person who's doing the infringing,
yes, and who makes that
might
decision on whether
consider it
it's
safe, and you might consider it isn't.
be an interesting discussion to have with the legal team.
It's Steve. So it's in the opinion of the warranted enforcement officer. So it's our harbour master and deputy harbour master. In the same way as it's in the opinion of an enforcement officer when it's a RMA non-compliance. So obviously anybody has the chance to defend themselves and put their view forward, but ultimately we appoint and warrant our experts, which in this case will be Steve and Pete and Jen over time, I'm sure. And they make that determination. And then obviously there is a formal process because this is a formal infringement regime where anyone can choose to defend that decision.
Yeah. So is it...
Thanks, Richard, and welcome.
Yeah. Is it useful to have in the opinion of the harbour master or somebody in there so it's clear? I mean, if I was a smart ass boatie, I'm like,
So that's,
I would say, yeah, but I thought it was safe.
I think
that's
that's
not required. It's not required for this schedule in terms of the Ministry of Transport process. In terms of communications that go out to the public, it would, obviously we would make that clear, but it's not relevant for this part of the process.
I think it might be worth an amendment next time the bylaws are reviewed, though,
Yeah,
because there are a number of areas where we do clarify that.
Yeah,
This
excellent.
is obviously one that isn't.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gary,
Steve, thanks. We're saying that we will continue to have an education-based policy, I suppose, prior to issuing infringements. In the manner of harbour master duties, how will that effectively work?
Well, essentially, we deal with people on the water face to face, 90% of the time for this type of thing. And it's predominantly in the past 4 years since we've been developing the team, it's been an educational discussion. Firstly, here are some bylaws. Do you know there's some rules? And a sensible, realistic conversation around what we're talking about and what we're discussing. I think there's a level in me professionally and my team professionally that says that's infringible and that isn't. So I'd like to be sitting here thinking, everybody gets at least one chance unless it's of a really serious nature. I'd probably say I've only had one occasion in nearly 5 years where I would have infringed somebody without educating them first. And I'd continue to work through that mode in educating people on the water and as we go forward first. And infringement is a backup tool for the bylaws, essentially.
Right. So example-wise, you're on Lake Dunstan.
Yep.
You see, you're travelling. You see a boat. No one's got life jackets.
Yep.
Your education policy first would be, hey, you'll need to have life jackets.
It's a complete educational discussion around the bylaws and what the requirements are. And it might be even, take the boat to shore, don't navigate it again until you've got life jackets. At the second opportunity of, being not so clever and coming out and catching you a second time, then I'm going to look to potentially infringe because you've had the discussion, you've had all the information provided, and there's a sensible part of me that says you've had a warning once and there's an infringement process for the second time, maybe third time, depending on where we are. Certainly there's a good example recently somewhere where somebody, I think not too far from me, I won't name names or places, but they had 4 conversations with the same group of jet skis around educating before they ended up, breaking rules and doing some serious damage. So, that's got to be a first up conversation that's put very succinctly and well in order that you don't end up enforcing, but you do educate people going forward. Hopefully that answers.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether, like with vehicles, say there's a register of owners, and you're talking to a licensed owner who can show you a license.
Yep.
When it comes to boats, do you have some sort of system to be able to record who's on the boat, who you're then talking to next time round? That might be the following weekend or whenever.
Yeah, really difficult. We're not licensed here for boats or registered for skippers here like they are in Australia and other parts of the world. So that's a really difficult one. The vessel identification stuff in the bylaws this time round, which we've added to be consistent with ECAN, that will help in rego numbers or boat names and that type of thing, and can potentially be tracked by police if requested. So that's where we're at with that. It's not an ideal world in that sort of point from that angle, but it's a national level discussion, which I know is happening at Maritime New Zealand and the Minister at this point. So we'll see how that progresses.
I think if you're saying to me that the education element remains the priority first, and then we're not going to be pinging sort of families who have made innocent mistakes.
Definitely.
Who will rectify it at a later date. No, that's cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I think Richard.
Yes, so just following on from Gary, 2 questions. Repeat offenders. So it might be a different person to vote, but if you prosecuted a person, they're in the system, and they come and do it again, is there any implication there?
Other than keep going down the infringement enforcement process that we have in place, it becomes very difficult. And unless there's a criminal element to that offence, then it becomes a police matter, a Maritime New Zealand matter.
Yeah, so is it like if I had a car and I, 130k, and then I did it twice, and then I did it 3 times, at some point,
Let's go up.
I'm going to get locked up.
I'd be looking to uplift that to Maritime New Zealand. and see how they go through that process. And potentially, like I say, if there's any criminal element, it will go police-led.
Yeah, okay.
Taken out of our
Thank you.
hands.
And you've said that the same system has been at Environment South and Queenstown Lakes and Environment Canterbury. And how long has it been with them, and have there been any issues?
Well, the structure for this and the fine levels have been based on the local guys around us. Nationally, I think probably 90% of the areas across New Zealand have infringement processes on their bylaws, because that's what they're designed to do.
Yep.
The bigger areas are obviously more forthright with them. I know Queenstown use them in a completely different manner. They're quite heavy on the fines and enforcement stuff. I know that there are huge numbers in Waikato, Bay of Plenty, Auckland, places like that, and the guys are regularly using the enforcement process to back up the bylaws. And it's really on a numbers game. There's more people, so there's more infringements. And more
Are there any issues? Like, it's going to create a lot more administration, surely. Like Richard's going to start sweating, and Nick's going to start sweating.
I would say,
You're going to be sweating.
I would say if there are some issues, some known issues around the country for non-payment of infringements and taking that through the enforcement process, because the cost of that is far outweighs the actual, implicated fine or infringement fee that you're going to recover. So there are some potential issues around that. In a best case scenario, you're avoiding that with the educational process. We'll have to see how that unfolds.
Cool. Thank you.
Michael Laws.
Sorry, I apologise. Just trying to get the clarification between you and the distinction between you and the police. I've read all your bylaws, and relating to alcohol. Who's in charge of that? You or the police? So somebody who's driving a vet, because the reason I'm asking the question is I think the most common complaint I got last summer from people using boats on Lake Dunstan were people driving under the influence.
Yes, police-led, essentially. I don't have any powers under the bylaws to enforce against drink driving, and it's police. Maritime New Zealand have powers in the commercial world of boating activity, but not under the recreation. Now, anybody I engage or I suspect we have a misdemeanor or a bylaw breach, my first move is to call a police officer and let the police lead on any potential problems from there. I don't have the remit currently to enforce or breathalyse at this time. And again, Councillor, it's one of those national-led conversations with Maritime New Zealand that we're looking to improve. And I think I've talked to that previously at Council in the past.
You have. And the second question is, listen, without trying to put anybody in it, how available were the police if you, in actual fact, reported somebody driving clearly under the influence or their activity clearly influenced by alcohol?
I don't know the answer. I get where you're going, but I don't know the answer to that. How available are police, both here and in Central? It's not for me to answer, probably.
Isn't it?
Well, we have police under search and rescue. I don't know the answer to that. Essentially, Councillor, is how available are they? It's how available am I, and how available are the Coast Guard in any given scenario? I would say the search and rescue dynamic here in the Dunedin side and the coastal side is pretty good. Police are usually driving that search and rescue or emergency response. It's less so in Central, but on the odd occasion I've had engagement, it's been pretty good. But again, it's around the timing of any given offence or location, and access to it, I guess, would be a number of issues for us. So, I don't have a definitive answer of how available the police are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard.
Thanks. Sorry. In terms of what you were talking about before, in terms of giving people warning and educating, I I didn't quite get whether or not if somebody was caught, whether you would write their name down as a matter of course. Yeah.
I have powers to gain contact details, address details, name, numbers, that sort of thing. Yes.
So that would always happen. Or?
Yes, it would
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's good to know. Because I don't know, from my perspective, we've had bylaw in play. Well, we've had rule in place in terms of wearing life jackets and things like that. And to be honest, everyone knows they're supposed to be wearing life jackets. If you're heading out to sea with your family without life jackets or something like that, that isn't an educational matter from my point of view. And there are some instances where we have a bylaw and we have infringements, we use it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because some things are potentially life-threatening.
Some things are non-negotiable.
Yeah.
And we do operate in that manner, especially on the boat ramps and stuff like that, where people are heading out, asked, have the discussion of where they're going, what their intentions are. You're going over the bar. Have you got this? Have you got that? Well, actually, I haven't got any life jackets. Well, I'm going to tell you to not go out until you've got them, please. So we do have those conversations. And I would say that recording details, I do have powers to do that as the harbour master. And that helps us in the incident management area as well. So all the smaller things are starting to go into a database, and we're starting to get a better handle on all of the sort of on-water incident management area, which falls into this a little bit as well. So the records are starting to be maintained and kept, and will give us a really good picture as we develop that through the ongoing years.
Thank you.
I'll move from the chair the recommendations set out in the audit paper seen by Gary. Any discussion? If not, I'll put those forward. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Gary, thank you very much for your good work, Steve, and the rest of your team.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to 8.8, which is the briefing on the National Adaptation Plan consultations report is provided to advise councillors on the Ministry for the Environment current consultation, Adapt and Thrive, building a climate resilient New Zealand draft National Adaptation Plan managed retreat. We had the workshop with us. We got Francesco.
Anne's online and Warren as well.
Anne is online and Warren as well. So welcome all. Francesco, it's your report. We've got the 4 recommendations there in front of us. Was there anything you wanted to comment on? Thank you for the workshop the other day. Thank you for taking on board our views. Is there anything you wanted to add?
No, I just wanted to clarify that that there's been a mislabeling. The thing that's been attached isn't actually the full submission. And I also wanted to thank the councillors for their excellent inputs into the workshop last week. We got a lot of value out of it, and we've incorporated your comments.
Thank you for that, because the 3 pages that part of the workshop, seem to reflect in your report that was the submission. And thank you for the clarity. That's all good. No doubt you'll circulate the submission at a later date. Thank you. Okay.
More than happy to move, but just wondering, is there a process to be heard on this stuff, given in the Otago lens? And is that something for staff, or is it something for the chair? I appreciate it's a staff submission, but it's got input, and I'm just checking that there isn't a submission process on it. Be heard.
So through you, Chair, I think collectively we're all saying, as far as we know, there isn't.
Okay, thank you.
Process. But if we find out there is, we can arrange for the chair to do that.
Thank you. I'm more than happy to move.
Okay. Seconder. Thanks, Kieran. So that's the 4 recommendations. 4 recommendations as set out on the paper. I'll pull those together. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Gary? Yes. Thank you very much to you all. Moving on to 8.9, Emergency Management Partnership Agreement. Welcome to Glenn. Welcome to Gavin. Glenn, your role team leader, group office. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, unfortunately, Matt can't make it today as he's still recovering from illness.
No. Good as well. We wish him well. Kevin, we're in your hands. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I'll just take the paper as read and answer any questions.
Good as gold. And this really essentially outlines the roles and responsibilities from their TA partners.
It's correct. It's a partnership agreement, so other councils will go through a process of considering and then ultimately, hopefully, signing the same agreement.
Excellent. Anything you wanted to add, Glenn?
No.
Very good. Any questions or queries? Hilary and then Brian.
I take it at the discussions you've been having with them, this is the document that will be presented to the other partners.
Yes.
And everyone's happy about this as the one to take back to your leaders, as it were.
It did go past the Merrill Forum. I just can't quite exactly remember. Can't remember exactly when, but it certainly did go past that forum.
Cool.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Do you want to add that? Anything?
No, that's what's happened.
Cool. Sorry, was it Brian?
Yeah.
Please.
Just can't find the notes that I made, but from memory, so this is a situation where they're using ORC staff. Is that right, we thought? Yeah. Emergency management using ORC staff. And so the whole from memory, the whole expectation was about what we could do for them. We're providing the staff and doing certain things. And the question that was in my mind was really, what could they do? What did they need to do for us? So, for example, I would have thought that there would be some type of reporting back mechanism so that that the governance group of the mayors, I'm hoping I'm off the right report here, basically, and that entity is providing regular information to this table about how things are tracking and any issues, and if there was any employment concerns, for example, as well. And that undertaking has been previously provided, but I can't remember the last time we really got an in-depth update in relation to emergency management. Please tell me I'm wrong.
Kevin, would you like to?
Yeah, what's the question?
So I'll ask the question again.
Yep.
The question is, what is there in here to provide feedback from this entity back to the ORC governance about any issues and general performance tracking? So everything's about providing information to them and expectation. We're providing staff, we're doing this. What are they providing to us? What do they need to provide to us?
You want to talk through the structure that's been established,
Page 382's
Kevin,
got it, sort of.
to perhaps help outline how it all fits together. There's a few pieces of the puzzle.
Well, we're supposed to be getting regular reports. Like, do we get those regular reports?
Well, through you, Mr. Chairman, the reporting you get is in the context of ORC's contribution to the group. And so this morning at Finance Committee, you received the quarterly report. In there was the measures and targets that we have to do with our part of civil defence, including giving effect to this partnership agreement. So that's the primary mechanism for reporting to this council on civil defence. The other mechanism will be through the chair's report, given that the chair is a member of the joint committee. So those are the two reporting mechanisms. But Mr. Mitchell might be able to explain a little bit about the governance arrangements and how that reporting works up through liaison committee, KEG, joint committee.
And also to clarify that the partnership agreement isn't just about what the ORC is providing to the other councils in the group, but actually what their role is and what they are bringing to the table as well. And yes, so our regular reporting is first of all through the coordinating executive group, the executives, who then put recommendations through to the joint committee. And then from there, the representatives of the joint committees would, the expectation is they're reporting back to their own councils.
Okay, well, maybe I owe an apology because case has just shown me. So you're saying under reporting, ensure elected officials and leadership team are informed of joint committee resolutions, directions and decisions. Provide joint reporting, and then monitoring, support, contribute, implement lessons learned, knowledge, support. Okay, and is that happening?
Those reports are definitely going through to the joint, to the coordinating executive group and then through to the joint committee on a quarterly basis.
But is there any reports coming back here? Because it's our staff.
That would be through the members of the joint committee back to.
From time to time, I think I've got something in my latest one about emergency management.
Carmen sits on something for that, doesn't she?
She's generally done some civil defence training.
Oh, is that all? Sorry.
Yeah,
I thought it was on.
I'm not aware of her standing on any of the
No,
committees.
sorry, apologies.
I do know that emergency management have sat right there and told us they'll be sending us regular formal reports from this group to this governance table. So we're at least in a transparent fashion, so we're at least aware of how it's going. And I think what our chair's saying is that he from time to time will write that something, but it's not the same, is it?
Well, so it's generally I will reflect on something that has gone to the mayoral forum under to the joint committee, and I bring back. And as I say in my latest report, it talks about that sort of national consultation process that's currently in play. Okay. Yeah, Gavin.
Mr. Chairman, just probably add that the best form of reporting will be the minutes and probably the agendas of the joint committee.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And those are available through the website, so they can be seen. Okay. And those are the best places to get the information from.
Whose website?
Emergency Management Otago certainly has the joint committee minutes on there.
Would you like me to follow that up and get those circulated to elected members?
Well, maybe just link to our website or something.
We should be sent them, according to us.
Okay, I will follow that up.
Page 382, if you're looking for the reference. Yes. Says ensure elected officials and leadership team are informed.
Okay. Thank you. Were there any other queries or questions? Oh, Michael Decker.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I want to echo what Brian's been expressing, really. As far as I'm concerned, CDEM has just about fallen off the radar. I feel very uninformed about where we're at in Otago and what's happening and who's in charge and what issues there are, what we should know about that we could be doing something about. I would really wish for a much better reporting regime than hopping onto a website occasionally. I don't remember the last time I saw minutes or heard a verbal report from anybody on CDEM. We used to have regular meetings with the so-called director, but that seems to have fallen by the wayside as well. Or have I missed something somewhere?
That's the question.
That's the question. I think the first step we'll get those meeting minutes circulated as a first step, and then if that doesn't meet our needs, we'll look at other forms of communication. Okay.
I'm happy to move when you are ready for that, but I would like to say, to give some fairness to the discussion, CDM were heavily involved, I think, at the outbreak of COVID or some of the staff, and they were somewhat overrun, and we had Richard reporting back to us quite regularly about their responsibilities under there at that stage. So we have definitely had reports. I think that's how it worked. Was it Richard on CDM? Yeah, well, both of you.
Richard was undertaking the role of controller during that response.
Yes, and so I think, to be fair, we have had very good, and it was a tiring process. I imagine it took a long time just to get back on kilter. So I just want to acknowledge the work that CDM did do for all of that, and that was a considerable and shouldn't be underrated as being a contribution that was thoroughly reported to us. But again, it would be great because it's actually really interesting stories for us to know about the great work you're doing.
You have to move the 4 recommendations.
Yeah.
Thank you. Seconding those, Kevin.
Oh, yeah, well, but I had a question as well, but
Okay, you have your second.
Sorry, Dave.
Yeah, I'm happy to second.
Question.
Two questions. One would be to you, Chair. If we're getting a report back, should that simply be going through either Data and Information or Implementation Committee? And I'll leave that with you.
Yeah,
I think that is probably where it slots into that sort of. But the second one, under financial considerations of this, Dr. Palmer, is what effect will this have on our current annual plan draft?
If you endorse this today, it has no effect. It's basically recording how things happen at the moment.
No discount.
Climate change is coming, beware.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
It's been moved and seconded. So I'll put those 4 recommendations all as one. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much, Glenn. Thank you very much, Gavin.
Right. I hope you don't need any work, but we won't have them.
Okay. So we're on item 8.10, which is the Waitaki designation notice of requirements. Welcome back, Gavin. And Alison. Welcome, Alison. So Alison's the commercial regulatory lead, engineering. So this report is provided to obtain council's approval to request new designations from the Waitaki District Council as part of their district plan review for land on which Otago Regional Council flood protection works and assets are situated. So we've got a full notice of requirement attached in our agenda item, and also as an agenda item, and also an attachment, the draft consultation strategy, a comprehensive consultation strategy, and a very comprehensive full notice of requirement application. I'll just go to Kevin first because he's going to sit out of this this particular item, but you have a question to do with consultation?
With the consultation process on page 537. And it's simply around, I just great process that you're going through, but your one-on-one meetings as required are actually scheduled in that region for August. And I would say 90% of the people that you'll be dealing with in August will be dairy farmers. It is right in the middle of their calving, and which is their best time to communicate with them.
Okay.
Yeah, so well, it's, I know there's not a huge amount of people, but I'd say at least 90% would be.
Good point.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll sit back there.
Excellent. Thank you. Any questions or queries? Hilary?
This isn't really a question, but I'd like to support these recommendations.
So you
move the
wonderful
resolutions partially on the basis that sometimes people suggest that we meddle in operations, and sometimes we have a role that we're obliged to do just because it has to come to us. And in this case, this is, if we got in amongst it, we'd be meddling in operations, but we are obliged to do something at this today. And so to me, I think they're perfect.
Thank you. Seconded by Kate. So any further discussion? If not, I'll put those 4 recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much, Alison. Thank you, Kevin. Very good. Very good report. Moving on to H4. Show you the Target Catchment Community ORC contracts. Welcome, Andrea.
It's pretty good.
Welcome back, Gavin.
Right,
The report seeks council's permission to enter a multi-year agreement with the Otago Catchment Community OCC to support catchment groups across Otago to improve the environment. We've got a couple of attachments there, the OCC's Year 1 report and also a proposed multi-year funding agreement. Andrea, is there anything you wanted to, great to get to this point with, and I'll go to Brian in a minute as well after Andrea, but yeah.
Should I stand aside to this, Mr. Chair? I really Because you've challenged me on this before. You did challenge me on this.
No, well, I said if it was something to do with the cozy homes, I'd push my chair back because I'm a
That's
trustee.
what I've
And
answered.
that's-
So I think these guys can handle it.
Yeah, I
I'm
think-
I'm the alternate. But-
Okay.
So can I just,
Can I just go to Andrew? No,
I
hang on.
want to ask you the same technical question.
Oh, okay, right.
I'm the alternate, although I haven't been to a meeting recently on this, but I just want to check that everyone here lives in a catchment and therefore is likely or able to get Otago catchment communities involved, in which case none of us have to leave the table on that basis, I presume, except for I understand Brian being on the committee. Would you like the alternate to leave as well?
No.
It's always up to your own thing.
Yeah, well, I don't know, because I'm Brian's attending, but I just want to make that point that we're all involved at some level with this potentially, so it's hard.
So just to be clear, I just made the point to Brian, it was
I know.
Cozy Homes Trust and it was at annual plan time.
It's
and we were going to
debate.
approve some money. I'll be pushing the chair back. So
Benefit no greater than the general public.
Yeah.
you're right.
I just wanted to.
Sorry, Andrea, back to you. Good to get to this point. Is there any comments you wanted to make in terms of your report?
Through the chair, no, thank you. I think it's self-explanatory.
Excellent, thank you. Hilary.
I sort of like where this is going, and I like a lot of things about it, but my concern is around, and I want to know what you at the moment would expect to say. It's described as a 3-year agreement. It has in it that it could be only year by year. It's described as providing some certainty without quite binding us in things. If we were here next year, after the first year, would you be advising us that this group had a reasonable expectation that so long as they had done what they would be expected to do, they would be anticipating that the money would come again? I'm just it's sort of got a bob both ways, and I'm just because I can see us coming along to an annual plan hearing and somebody saying, well, they did everything that they said, and this is a 3-year agreement. So what do you mean you're anticipating that you might cut it? That wouldn't be fair on them. They've got this. So I'm just sort of trying to imagine what you guys would say in that situation. I do understand the difficulty of sort of having it and not having it.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. I think the advantage of what we're recommending is probably more an operational efficiency. So instead of every 12 months going through a process of digging out the agreement and reconfirming it, it's just avoiding that by having a multi-year agreement where we shouldn't have the need to do that every year to revisit it because it'll apply year on year. In terms of what a group would take from it, as we've noted in the report, council's got almost $4 million over 10 years for this activity in the long-term plan. It's core activity of council. Delivering it in this fashion through catchment groups is something strongly supported by council, it seems. So it seems unlikely that we've changed, but it's still a possibility. And we need that flexibility in the agreement because you could choose to reduce that amount or allocate resources differently in years 2 and 3.
Yeah, so you'd be sort of saying at the end of the day, if it happens, and it would be usually core business, this is how it will happen. So this is a description of our operational idea of how it will happen, which council can decide year by year as to the funding of, but this is currently the level that operationally we tend to.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to describe it. It's got that operational detail which will endure across the 3 years, subject to you making or a council making a decision every year that it will fund it.
Is it really any different to Yellow-eyed Penguin Trust, where we've had a partnership agreement over a 3-year period or whatever it was? And I think we also had that with Cozy Homes maybe a few years ago. But is it really any different? Yeah.
It didn't have 10 years in the Yellow-eyed Penguins, wasn't in.
No, true. No, I get that. But I understand that this is a 3-year deal. correct? Or that's the preferred option?
Through the chair, I guess the difference is that there's much more defined deliverables. So the contracts, I guess that, or the funding agreements that I inherited lacked any sort of, it's red.
It's right.
Yes.
Red means stop. Through the chair, so it's different in that it's got more direct deliverables, I guess, and a much greater sum of money. So potentially requires a little bit more formality around it. Those other agreements were very high level, and they were really grants as opposed to contracts for delivery of an activity.
Fair enough. Thank you. Who's next? Gary.
Thank you. Would it be fair to say that by going on a 3-year term or a 3-year period, it would create better longevity and security to the key people that are involved in the project? So we're more likely to have facilitators that would stay with the project because they know there's more certainty across a 3-year period as opposed to the risk that might sit year by year.
Through the chair, I assume that would be an outcome of having a greater certainty or a longer contract period. So since the council first provided that initial seed funding, Taupo Catchment Communities has also attracted MPI funding for maybe 4 years. So we're not the only funder now, but I imagine that having that certainty that more or less mirrors the government funding allows them to potentially extend those fixed term contracts.
Cool, thank you.
Kevin.
No question. No.
Heavy
Oh, yeah, sorry, I have got one question. Sorry. Page 570 under outcomes and deliverables, project data reported, submitted when available, output reporting to be uploaded into ORC GIS spatial database with assistance from ORC. When is it anticipated that that facility will be available?
Through the chair, that's part of the integrated catchment management framework that will come to council on the 29th of June. So that's an important piece of infrastructure to support catchment action plans and other work being led by ORC and by the community. So we don't yet have a proposal for the specifics around that database, but it's a key element. So you'll receive further information about that at the end of June. But we're just signalling that once it's available, but yeah, we haven't yet allocated a budget to that database. But we do have funding in the LGP to support those outcomes.
Right, so we'll know that, yeah, okay, so that the plan and some dates around that will come in June. Thank you. Kate?
Thank you. And I really like that you're giving this security. I just want to ask, as an example, page 571, there's a performance about pursue opportunities with communities to support ORC's water, biodiversity, biosecurity. They're doing it. Then deliverable, list referrals made from OCC to catchment groups and ORC regarding water, biodiversity, biosecurity. Now, if they're doing referrals, you're collecting that here already. I'm wondering if we're double whammying, asking them to give you a list of presumably of something that will be listed here already if the referral was actioned. And I'm just wanting to focus on outcomes that are positive in actions. That can become a really time-consuming thing. I referred X, Y, and Z to biosecurity. Can you understand what I mean? And presumably if they've done that, then they come in the door to you, you need to know it's from OCC.
Through the chair, so we're just, because it's a considerable amount of money potentially and increasing, we're trying to make sure that we are translating those opportunities into action, whether it's ORC or OCC. So the structure to achieve that is a quarterly meeting where those sort of things are raised and documented by ORC. So it's relatively minimal administrative burden for OCC, but it's also, I think, important that that we capture that information so that we can demonstrate that either one of those parties has taken up that idea and considered it and either implemented it or deferred it or agreed that it wasn't worth pursuing. So we're not trying to create administrative processes for the sake of it. But we are trying to get value for the investment, I guess, in terms of realising those opportunities.
And that's a good segue to my second question, if I may. The one thing I don't think we're capturing, which I think is brilliant, is that a lot of these catchment groups are bringing in money that is doing a lot of the work that we could be saving money on for the integrated catchment work, and we're not capturing where that money is coming in. And although it may not be going directly with OCCs, often they're a partner in those relationships. And I'm just wondering if someone can report at some stage what the funding that's coming in from elsewhere that is doing some great work in our community is, because I think that's a really interesting thing for us to capture. If we're putting in $1 for $4 in, that's a really good news story.
I think the last environmental implementation report had a list of all the projects and the actual funding that was coming externally as well, and what those total investments were with LIC external funding the catchment groups had secured, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Through the chair, that's correct. $53 million and I think 25 projects at the moment. That won't cover everything because there will be small pockets of money outside of the Jobs for Nature, but it does capture the bulk of the work.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. You're moving to.
Yeah, I'd like to move that.
4 recommendations. Yes.
I was about to move it and then say something as well.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm happy to second. Yes, you go first.
Well, it was just simply to say thank you to Andrea for analysing where we're at and how we can be a little bit more accountable, and also harness the really good value that we're getting already and be able to share that story as well. The surety that this will provide to catchment groups is going to be amazing in terms of them being able to harness the funding that Kate's talked about as well. Having it down as an actual agreement on paper will make it a lot easier to get co-funding. I liked what you had in there in terms of reporting back and things like what Kate talked about, like what is our investment managing to achieve environmentally? How is it helping to attract co-funders? What are we actually doing? And being able to see that annually is going to be really helpful for this council as we build up in this area, and things only get bigger and better as our funding indicates as well. So yeah, well done.
Well said, thank you. Any further discussion? I'll put those 4
and just as second, I'll just add to that. But I think this is great work bringing us together, Andrea and your team. What it's only going to give us, actually, by doing this, we're going to give some real power to the people that are actually already doing great work in their catchments and great work for the environment. But I'm sure it will, because we're supporting it and giving our commitment, will actually encourage other people that have been reluctant at the moment to get in because of commitments, that they'll show we're committed, and I'm sure that they will encourage other people to come along. So a very good step, a very good reporting parameters around, and I think this will just start to grow from strength to strength. So thanks very much, and I encourage everyone to support a key part of the very good work RRC is trying to do.
Thank you. I'll put those 4 recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Thank you very much, Andrea. Thank you, Kevin.
Who's going to tell Brian it failed?
Chairperson's report, item 9.
Well done, Brian.
I'd like to move that we receive this report. Note this report.
Thank you. Seconder.
Yep.
Seconder Alexa, thank you. Any discussion? Anything I just wanted to highlight was the letter from the mayors, Mayor Bolton, Mayor Hawkins, and just wondered, Alexa had drafted a response, but it probably needs an opportunity for us to have a discussion to sort of work out some principles around PT before we go into a discussion with those two councils. So if we have an opportunity, and I'm just wondering with draft annual plan discussions on 1st and 2nd of June, if we find some time to actually sit down and have a chat about that, it would be best in public excluded to get a feel for what we're after as a governance group, and to get some advice from Gavin and the transport team to help that discussion. Alexa, do you want?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think we need to acknowledge the letter, just at least just see something back saying acknowledging it and saying that we're going to discuss.
Okay, so if we do that in the interim, and then the next step will be that conversation, and then
with the council and the transport team.
Okay. Any other queries? Also, I'll follow that up, Alexa, with you with regard to that reply. Yeah. Any other comments?
Well, I just think on that, we're talking to both groups today, and their submission on the annual plan, it's very clear that while that may be their intent in the long term to grab a hold of the buses, they're actually really keen to collaborate and talk through things at the moment. So I think if nothing more, they're showing a very good intent to get things going. So
yeah, we'll see.
I think we should acknowledge that.
Thank you. Michael Decker.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I really just wanted to thank you for your report. It's not often we get such a long, detailed and interesting report from the chair. And this has been the best I've seen in a very long time. So thank you for the work you've done and for the detail with which you've reported it. Also to say it's good to see Des Smith looking so happy and healthy. He's done an amazing job out there, and thank you for including that photograph of him. Haven't seen him for months. So anyway, Andrew, thank you. I support Hillary's motion, and I hope that our chair's reports carry on with the same quality. Great.
Thank you. There's no further discussion. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Against, carried. Moving on to the notice of motion, item 10. This is in accordance with Standing Orders section 24.3. The following valid notice of motion was received from Kate for inclusion on the agenda. Kate, did you want to speak to the notice?
I think I moved the original motion, and given that the local government review is happening and that it may well prescribe a voting system, I think this is a waste of $70,000 that could be saved from our annual plan budget, and therefore I move accordingly.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Second by Hillary. Any discussion? I know there was a notice of motion. You have discussion? Surely. Is there any discussion? Brian.
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to remember what this was. This was a poll with the list for this election.
Yeah, this election. So it's cost $70,000. So we're not going to do it. We shouldn't do it because the local government review suggested that they may.
I think this is for 2025, though.
Yes, we do it now to look at how we poll in 2025.
Yeah, so why wouldn't you do it? I mean, like the DCC has changed from the first past the post. Why wouldn't you do it?
Because the local government review has suggested in their meeting with us that they may prescribe the way people vote to get a one voting system throughout the country. So it will be moot. It will be taken off our hands potentially by 2025.
What are the chances of that?
Well, that was the indication that they gave us when they came and talked to us.
Yeah.
That they thought that was going to happen. I think that's how everyone else saw it anyway.
Yeah, that's
I'm asking the question.
Yeah.
That's fine.
That's fine. It's absolutely fine.
Thank you.
Nothing, no further debate or questions? If not, I'll put the motion, which essentially is the two set out there, 1 and 2. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, moving on to item 11, which are the recommendations adopted at committee meetings. I'll move that council adopts the resolution of, no, I won't. Richard, ready to move for Kate, seconded by Kate. Recommendations of 7th of April 2022 strategy planning committee meeting. Richard, seconded by Kate. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? carried. Recommendations of the 4th of April 2022 Implementation Committee, moved by Brian. I'll second.
Yeah.
Any discussion? If not,
Excuse me.
Sorry, Hillary.
Just a brief note, and I'm going to vote for all these, but we need to be looking at sometime, and it's probably
We've had that discussion this morning.
after the next. Oh, did you? Okay. I'll pull my head in, excuse me.
Okay, I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Recommendations of the 8th of April 2022 Target South and Regional Transport Committee, moved Alexis, seconded Kate. Any discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Now that concludes the public part of the meeting, and in a moment when we finish the live stream, we will reconvene the public excluded part of council. So thank you everyone for your attendance on Zoom, or members of the public on Zoom.